Out of the gates and ready to go. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow underway. The Wednesday edition has arrived.
We're ready to bang some hats today, ladies and gentlemen. Let's
go.
Let's go.
6th and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Bill Bender will join us. That's coming up in 20 minutes. Sporting News national writer will dive into, his part of the country, Big Ten country, and specifically what's going on at Michigan and what to expect now, maybe this week, maybe tomorrow. Doesn't seem like today. We'll get Bill's take on that and what he's hearing, ear to the ground. Plus, Tank Williams, former NFL safety and college and NFL analyst, he'll jump in the mix coming up in hour number 3. And in between, primary complaints. Always love airing our top grievance of the week. Chad, good afternoon.
Going to talk to Tank about his alma mater. We haven't had a chance to talk to him since the big come-from-behind win against Colorado. So some good things happening with them. Troy Taylor in year 1 at Stanford had a great chance at upsetting Washington also. So that's a program playing a lot better, Tank's alma mater.
I also want to ask him, because he's NFL vet, how many teams actually believe they're good enough to get to the postseason and actually do something? Because there's a lot of teams that are just on the outside, a lot of 5-win teams in the AFC, for instance. A lot of bad teams in the NFC are still in the mix, right? And that's typical for the NFL, but how many truly in a locker room are like, we're dialed in and we're ready to make a run in week 10? There's
a benefit to being sober-minded as someone that's with a team or an organization, but there's also sort of a hysterical element to sports to where when you're inside of it, you want your guys believing they can do anything, right? And you want your team to buy into, hey, we're all paid here. We can go out and win. We can go on a run. Season's not over, not mathematically eliminated, all that. But asking Tank about the balance between the two, when you're in charge of the organization, when you're the coach, when you're the GM, as compared to the players, and then knowing just where you are as a team and how that affects your outlook week to week, we can definitely get into that.
Chad, what are you expecting today from Michigan in a response and what it could include to the Big Ten? But prior to any discipline that will be handed down, which we assume is coming, the question is when.
Yeah, so the Big Ten is waiting. This report from earlier today, I know that
the timetable, they're waiting on a response from Michigan, who has an opportunity to present their case as to why they shouldn't be punished from the conference.
Right. They gave basically the notice of allegations. Like, here's the notice of the penalty, the sportsmanship policy. So now you had, when they gave it to them, you have until Wednesday afternoon or whatever the time is to respond to it. But then a part of the report is the Big Ten is not going to immediately respond. They're going to process what Michigan says in response. Now, I don't think there's any mistaking the fact that suddenly these reports come out yesterday of what Michigan handed the Big Ten office and Tony Petitti in regards to Ohio State and Rutgers sharing information on their signals with Purdue before last year's Big Ten championship game. Everyone's saying that's not going to factor into the Big Ten's decision. I think that it does, quite frankly, only because Tony Petitti may have been blind to other people trying to steal signs. Does not change the fact that the way Michigan did it is in direct violation of NCAA rules. Now, Tony Petitti could come back and say, hey, this is pretty foolproof evidence we got also of what the other coaches were doing against Michigan. So we're going to make it a 1-game suspension now for Harbaugh and back off a little bit and then let the NCAA handle the whole Connor Stallion situation. I don't know, but Hutton, I expect movement today, that we're going to hear something in this news cycle today on what is the punishment for Jim Harbaugh.
Dan Wetzel with a column with Yahoo, and it had to do with the idea that one is a blue-collar crime and one is a white-collar crime. Violation, penalty coming, whatever. The white-collar crime being Purdue giving signals to Rutgers and Ohio State. The blue collar, of course, being Connor Stallions and what we're seeing. And also the fact that it's Jim Harbaugh and it's whether or not he knew and what you can prove and what you can't. But Wetzel is, in his column in the mailbag that he wrote, his stance is both are against what the NCAA rule states about outside scouting and whether or not if you're pointing to getting it from the outside and learning about the signs and not having to decipher things by a fan or a scout on the road, that still is a competitive advantage if that's what you're saying from the NCAA stance. And it certainly would be in violation of quote-unquote sportsmanship but which is what is the policy that the Big Ten is going to govern under, not the NCAA rule per se. And perception is that what Michigan is doing is far worse. But, Chad, isn't it also about what you can and can't prove if you're Tony Petitti?
Well, so Dan Wetzel's column is really, really good, and I think it certainly makes you think about all of it. Well thought out. And his argument is this. It's not that it's the same NCAA violation that's gone on here. He's saying we're talking about different means to get to the same endpoint.
Right.
So where one is a smash and grab is how he describes it. That's Connor Stallions going in and invading and being on the sideline and buying tickets and using a cell phone footage. That's a smash and grab. That's a blue-collar crime versus the white-collar crime of an organization of coaches in the conference doing it and then presenting that to another team.
In advance.
I get what he's saying here, but here's where I take issue with the column. He says it's both forms of advanced scouting that is not legal, right? That's not true. Advanced scouting is legal. Off-site scouting is not legal. Now, if Michigan can prove that they were doing this off-site with people in the building and filming it, and then they're compiling their info that way, that's one thing. Now, is it a gray area? Sure. That Greg Schiano likes Ohio State and hates Michigan, so he's going to hand over the signs to Purdue because he wants Michigan to lose, and he's going to do this with Ohio State in conjunction with them, where each side has one defense and offensive signals. Yeah, there's a gray area there for sure. But let's look specifically at the rules. And I jotted this note down because Dan wrote, they're both forms of advanced scouting. However you look at it. Advanced scouting is fine. You can look at the All-22. You can look at television footage. You can watch it during the game. You can have one guy, just like you got a quarterback spy with a linebacker on a mobile quarterback. You can have one guy looking on the other sideline on your staff that's specifically looking at the signs, trying to decipher them during the game. That's not expressly prohibited within the NCAA rules. What Connor Stallions did is. So I get the whole gist of it. Hey, we got to the same endpoint. One team did it one way, the other teams did it another way. That's fine if you want to legislate it that way. But the main issue here, and this is what other coaches are saying, is that what Michigan did is unfounded. Teams don't do that. And I do think, Hutton, there is a level of violation here. And I'm not talking about NCAA rulebook violation. I'm talking about programs feeling violated. That a member of the Michigan staff is on a sideline wearing another team's gear to scout a rival, or is buying up a ticket and sitting in the stands filming while his team's playing somewhere else. Now, look, that's just me talking. I get what Wetzel's saying. But if I'm a program, I feel more personally violated with someone in my building doing that as opposed to what we're talking about here. Here's the other thing. I don't know what the evidence is. All we get are the reports that they presented evidence that this happened. Rutgers would not comment. Ohio State did not respond for comment when asked to comment about these allegations from Michigan. I think this is all coming to a head today. We're going to learn something getting ready for this Michigan-Penn State game on Saturday.
That's already been presented to Petitti last week when Michigan turned this over, based on an unnamed former Big Ten staff member that gave this back to Michigan. But also keep in mind, like, the gray area, I'm not debating the gray area of, to me, there's a definitive rule about off-site scouting in advance. What we're doing with the Big Ten, though, and what Petitti has notified Michigan about, is the sportsmanship policy. And it states two very different things. The sportsmanship policy that, in essence, they've notified Michigan they're prepared to hand down discipline about, and what they're going to respond to, says actions that are offensive to the integrity of the competition are punishable, and there's no appeal to it. So if you're Petitti, how do you handle this, given the fact that to this point, there's no hard evidence linking Harbaugh or, quite frankly, any other coach to what we were seeing from Connor Stallions? That's the difficult part that I think Petitti and the Big Ten have themselves in, because time is on the side of the NCAA, because they've always used that. It's always the back burner, and this is a process. This is the sped-up version of what no one's willing to wait around about from the Big Ten offices. But what they've also done is opened up this box for the sportsmanship policy, where we also, while on surface level, while you're not handing over signs, that would be exactly what Michigan's getting bashed about if, in fact, they handed over signs to South Carolina.
Yeah.
Right? This is the same thing. And also, that would fall under sportsmanship. What happened? What signs were given to Central Michigan, which didn't help them, by the way, in week 1. 7-6, I believe, late in the second quarter, but didn't help them in the final scoreboard. But
were there signs handed over? We don't know. Maybe he was just doing that to scout Michigan State and not helping Central Michigan in that game.
Right.
That just gave him a good vantage point for it. We don't know.
But what we also don't know is how did Purdue get the signs, or how did they obtain that? Because the flip side of the argument that Michigan fans, or really anyone that says everyone's doing it, the flip side is everyone's doing it. They're just not doing it to the level that Connor Stallions is being stupid about. Keeping a track record and using his name on the different accounts for Venmo or whatever, and having the trail back to him specifically. The one thing they were extremely careful about is not linking anything to the head coach or the staff, for that matter, even though the guy is seen on the sideline standing next to the offensive and defensive coordinators, depending on who the opponent has on the field at the time. So that to me is the gray area that Petitti has now entered into, that if Michigan comes back with a harsh response saying, here's what we're doing and here's what we're going to threaten, if you're Tony Petitti, I like the fact that they've already put out there that they're going to wait and decipher how to react to what Michigan is about to respond with. But Chad, they're also admitting, like, we need to see what we're up against, and this isn't helping. And in fact, to this point, the news and the info and the reports that we know about have been through a private investigation firm, or it's been leaked based on contacts with TCU that say, oh yeah, we knew about this, coaches were calling us, whatever. If you're doing all that, but you don't have the hard evidence on Harbaugh, what do you really have, and what is Petitti acting on? Because to me, if you've got evidence that links Harbaugh, now is the time to put it out there, because if you don't, what really is going to happen other than an injunction? You need the hard evidence, just like we're seeing with Connor Stallions, and we don't have the hard evidence on the sign sharing that is being alleged for Ohio State, Rutgers, and Purdue. We also don't have that for Harbaugh right now. We don't have any hard evidence that, yes, he needs to be able to oversee and know about it, and we agree. He knew about it. But again, if sign sharing, Michigan has allegedly been doing that, this is the same thing that has also been alleged. And I don't know if you're the commissioner, if you're wading into those waters to open up the policy that is so vague, but you're also going to have to treat everyone on the same playing field. Well, it's a very unusual move.
Let's also keep in mind that this is not strike one for Jim Harbaugh with the NCAA and violating rules. This is like 2 or 3 down the line.
But it's the one that the Big Ten got involved with.
And the fact that they've had – well, my point is, it's not – if you're Jim Harbaugh, you can't fall back on we are Michigan men and men of integrity, and that we run our program with the utmost – values of playing by the rules and keeping them in mind at all. You can't do that anymore. Yeah. The dude served a 3-game suspension this year, and now this. So I think you lose the plausible deniability part of it with that. Even if they can't link him directly to it because they did a good job and they were smart about not texting him about it. Jim Harbaugh can sit there and say, look, we had this guy there that was really good at picking up signs like everyone has, and he's telling us this. We didn't know how he was doing it. Right? Or I could say I didn't know. Maybe someone else did, but I didn't know. No one's going to buy that. And even if it's true, you lose the ability to go with that because of the previous crimes by Jim Harbaugh and the suspension he served and everything else. If this was a first strike and this was completely out of character for Jim Harbaugh and all that, okay, maybe more people are buying, hey, maybe this guy is just rogue and no one knew about it, even though he's right in the ear of the coordinators on the sideline on video during the games. But maybe no one knew how he was getting it. I think you lose the ability to use that excuse, given what's gone on with the Michigan program.
But also, Petitti's not getting into this unless if he didn't hear the response that he heard on that meeting, on that video conference with the coaches, right? So are the coaches just not going to be up in arms over these allegations, right? If it's a violation of the sportsmanship policy, I mean, to me, it's a very weird circumstance now where if you act on this and you want to go heavy-handed, how heavy do you go considering that there's going to be more that continues to come out, not just with Michigan, but they're going to leak all kinds of stuff now based on feeling like everyone's out to get them and everyone else is acting like.
Yeah, if they've got any info, now's the time to leak it. They leaked that yesterday. Let me also say this, and this is what I want to know if I'm Tony Petitti. I want to get all the coaches together and say, do you really believe Jim Harbaugh is a cheater that is getting a competitive disadvantage and you want him punished for that reason? Or do you just really not like Jim Harbaugh? That's a very pointed question I'm asking everyone. Because Jim Harbaugh has never been the most likable of coaches amongst other coaches. So I want to get to the bottom of that. How much of this is he has gone above and beyond, he is cheating, he's violating the sportsmanship policy, he's affected the games against you, versus how much of it is Jim Harbaugh wins a lot and we don't like the guy because his personality is weird and he's not the nicest, friendliest dude to us. I don't know the answer to that.
And what we do know,
but you got to get to the bottom of that too.
Petitti is the sole arbiter for what is offensive to the integrity of competition, as the sportsmanship policy states. Yeah. And he's reacting and going to meet with Michigan based on that video conference with coaches. What's the response from coaches based on these new reports that Michigan has surfacing? Bill Bender joins us next to join the discussion.
Quote, a good state champion caliber high school boys team would smoke the best team in the WNBA. Then this weekend, after the video was posted and the critics, of course, came for him, he doubled down on what he said, posting this on X. Quote, it's sexist to say women's basketball players aren't as good as men's. That was a question, obviously. It's my opinion, and I'm putting $1 million behind it. If I'm wrong, the WNBA team can take my money and make more from one game than they do for the entire season. Okay, so let's get into this because obviously there's a lot of people out there who are just assuming that Clay is being sexist, that he is trying to really punk the WNBA because, let's be honest, the ratings for the WNBA aren't great, which is exactly why Clay made the joke at the end of that. If you were to give them $1 million for losing the bet, that would be more than the WNBA would make regularly for one game under normal circumstances. But the fact remains that men and women biologically super different, and that's what he's talking about. We even look at a boys' high school basketball team and the makeup of their players, what they're able to do, their size, their skills, and look at the WNBA players who are oftentimes much older. They're professional basketball players, but still, the level of competition would not at all be on the same playing field. So, Chris, let's get into that. What is your take on this? The fact that people would say that, Clay, you're being sexist, when reality remains men and women, super different, even at very different ages, different places in their careers, there would be no matchup whatsoever.
I don't even think it's questionable. I love that Clay took it to him. I think a lot of times silence speaks louder than words. The Las Vegas Aces haven't said anything in response yet. Mm-hmm. So, look, you're right. I dug into the rosters, the Las Vegas Aces, and then, look, I've spent some time training at IMG Academy. I work with athletes at a school called Lou High, which is one of the top programs in the country. And we have guards 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". We're on the Aces. The tallest players are 6'3" and 6'4", and those are their bigs. So they don't even have anybody to really account for the bigs on the male teams. And I don't know that it's how in any way is this a sexist
question
thing to say. Yeah.
Well, I have a woman, I think, who will be able to help answer this question. She is super smart. She's super intelligent. I am a big fan of her. Everybody, you're also a big fan of her. We all are. It just has to be said. So let's go ahead and bring in the woman of the hour, Riley Gaines. Hello, Riley. I'm happy to see you again. I feel like I get to spend so much time with you these days.
I know, right? Very good to see you, and I will say it is rainy here as well, which just sucks.
Okay, so are you, I know the last time we talked, you were like bouncing all over the place. Where are you right now?
I'm actually in Nashville, but headed to New York today, so. I'll be on deck.
Okay, well, welcome. You get to go from rain to rain.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So Riley, let's get into the topic that we were just discussing. Obviously, Clay being a little bit sarcastic in the way that he framed the question, but he's saying he's willing to make a bet that the WNBA champions, still being the champions, professional basketball players, would not be able to hold a candle to any high school boys basketball team in the country. Is he being sexist, or is he just speaking facts that men and women are very different in terms of what they are capable of athletically?
Boom. Right there. It's not sexist to say men and women are different. Like you said, it's reality, it's truth, it's common sense, it's logic, it's reasoning. We all know it.
Sixth and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Glad you're with us for Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick network. Chad, every day there is something new, or there's new buzz at least about Connor Stallions, Michigan, what Jim Harbaugh knew, what he didn't know, what you can prove.
Rutgers, Ohio State, and Purdue.
Discipline.
The list goes on and on.
You know, what is the Big Ten capable of versus what realistically we expect. Bill Bender helps us to try to break some of this down and what's been a crazy storyline for weeks now. Bill with the Sporting News and does a great job in Big Ten country and beyond covering college football. Bill, thank you for the time, man. We really appreciate it. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on. Where do you want to start on this mess? Just fire away.
Well, okay. Where do you come down on what Michigan was doing, at least from based on what we know with Connor Stallions, versus everybody's doing it? Because I feel like people are either on one side or the other with what we're witnessing play out through the Big Ten and the NCAA.
I try to find the middle ground, and that's kind of what I've done my entire career, is trying to find what that sweet spot in the middle is. And for me, what has been alleged with Michigan, the sign stealing as far as in-game, not worried about that. Sending scouts to other places, not good, but still not blown away by that. The one that caught me the most, and it is alleged right now and it hasn't been refuted, was the fact that if Connor Stallions was on that Central Michigan sideline during a game, that is flagrantly wrong. And now we're getting into the debate of coaches sharing information with other coaches, especially with yesterday's story. And that's also a gray area. So you're wandering into enough gray areas that for those of us who have seen Fletch, it's become charcoal. And that's put Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti in a really tough spot, depending on what they decide to do from here.
And I think that is why so many are surprised that Tony Petitti sent the notice that disciplinary action could be headed Michigan's way, because it's under the sportsmanship policy. Were you surprised, given the fact that Michigan's certainly going to send out information that they may have based on the vague sportsmanship policy at the sole discretion of the commissioner?
Yeah, and I think part of this was the reported meetings with the coaches and the athletic directors and how heated they were last week, and how sometimes emotions can govern decisions like this. And we all know, all three of us know, that the NCAA doesn't exactly work on that timetable that they're looking for here. And I think from that standpoint, it doesn't surprise me that they're coming out and doing something where they could hit a snag, as if some kind of punishment is levied on Jim Harbaugh, a number of games, or this Michigan football team, which to me the most extreme case would be taking them off the field. Then there's going to be an injunction or a lawsuit or legal action. And then for those that want this story to go away, that's just not going to happen. I mean, I think it's right in front of our face. It's going to continue to dominate social media. I mean, it's trending on my timeline every day, and I don't expect that to change tomorrow or in the coming weeks, because nobody, I mean, what do you guys think? Nobody's going to be happy no matter what Tony Petitti does tomorrow. Not everybody's going to be happy.
Bill Bender with us from the Sporting News.
And I look at the report yesterday, you know, with Rutgers and Ohio State and feeding information to Purdue. I know our friend Dan Wetzel wrote a column about that it's just it's the same thing. They're both cheating, just different forms of it. specifically those accusations, and I know you refer to it, Bill, as a gray area. Is that enough for Michigan to present to the Big Ten and say, see, this goes on everywhere. They had our signs too. So don't do anything to us right now. Let the NCAA handle it with Connor Stallions or everyone. Or do you see what we've seen? And we've seen it, right? Video footage, photos, everything else in Michigan, that what we've seen of Michigan goes above and beyond just doing that.
Right. And I think Dan raised an excellent question in his column, which I read this morning, is which one are you going to take? Are you going to take one with cell phone video of a third-party guy with we all have cell phones. I can't zoom mine in half the time where I'm like, what am I doing? I have to go ask my wife, how do you do this? Versus professional coaches looking at that and breaking it down and doing it under the guise of, well, coaches trade every information every week when we talk. So I think the answer would be the latter in some cases, for sure. But that's independent of what Michigan did and what Michigan got caught doing, especially with Connor Stallions. And if they can't link Harbaugh, that's the sticking point to me, because Jim Harbaugh can just say, well, I deny it. And we can make all the inferences we want off of the videos that have been circulating on Twitter. And it certainly looks bad optically, for sure. But unless they can actually prove that, we're going to have a mess if they lay something down that Michigan doesn't agree with.
And Bill, not only is Michigan saying, hey, we're not linking anything to Harbaugh, they immediately suspended Connor Stallions and no one else. Aren't they also saying you can't prove that anyone else had anything to do with this?
Yeah, because you could try to link this to the coordinators, the offensive and defensive coordinators. We've been talking for 3 weeks about what competitive advantage means in a sport where the best thing that has come out of this 3-week mess, and you've seen that they're going to allow it in the bowl game, is we're putting headsets in the helmets.
Right.
So they can communicate on the field like adult football is, like I've been saying with the NFL, where we're not calling plays off sandwich boards, which I've said this all along, and this is the end game part of it. If you guys are coaching against me and your offense stops before they snap the ball and stand there for 15 seconds and look at the sideline, and I'm on the other sideline, am I supposed to cover my eyes? I'm not doing that. And if you find a way to crack that code, teams do that. But Michigan certainly, with these allegations, took those things too far. And like I said, the Central Michigan one was I was like, oh my gosh, are we really, that does look like him. I spent way too much time looking at the pictures and the videos. And that one's probably the worst of all of it.
And if it's true that just everyone wants Jim Harbaugh out and they don't like him, and this is kind of, they got the goods on him now, and they've turned everything over to the Big Ten. They want him gone. Well, there's still an opportunity for a team on the field to do the Lord's work here, if that's what they want done. And that team with the opportunity this Saturday is Penn State in Happy Valley. So let's talk on the field right now. What kind of chance do you give this Penn State team of being the one to knock off Michigan off their pedestal?
Well, on the field is what you have to look at now, right? And who can get it done on the field? Penn State's got a good chance. They're at home. They stopped the run well. The last 3 weeks, Michigan has averaged less than 4 yards per carry. So to me, that's different from past seasons where they could just hammer you with the running game. They had 418 yards against Penn State last season. So if you get J.J. McCarthy in some 3rd and longs, that's a hostile environment. It's one of the toughest places in the country to play. Penn State could do this. And that's what I've been asking people all along, fans of all the fan bases, whether it's Michigan, Penn State, or Ohio State. And again, trying to find that middle ground. It's like, what do you really want out of this? Do you want Michigan taken off the field? I don't even think Ohio State fans really want that. Do you want Jim Harbaugh suspended? I think that's the most popular option. Or do you want to see this play out on the field? And that's the one I always lean to, because that's why we cover this sport, to see Penn State play Michigan, to see Ohio State play Michigan, to potentially see Georgia play Michigan. One person that wasn't bothered by all this sign stealing nonsense, and you heard his answer, was Kirby Smart, because I think he knows he can beat these teams with the roster he has, and he can continue to play the underdog card because they're ranked number 2 in the rankings right now.
Would Tony Petitti have opened this up from the Big Ten perspective if it was just going to be a standard penalty and violation, meaning up to 2 games and a $10,000 fine? Do you believe it's going to be more than that, simply because it's now from the Big Ten's perspective, and they're not, it doesn't seem like, waiting on the NCAA to say anything or do anything. In fact, they're getting information fed to them from the NCAA.
The punishment you just laid out from day one is what I thought it should be. Take Jim Harbaugh off the field for 2 games. That's a competitive disadvantage for Michigan, not having him on the sideline for Penn State, not having him on the sideline for Maryland. Number 2, you hit it exactly right. I knew we'd get along. The money, the wallet, right? You hit them in the wallet, maybe more than what you said even.
Sure.
And go from there, hit them harder there. Then what happens? And you're already starting to notice this with Ric Flair showing up on campus and some other things that we're starting to cut college football games a little bit like wrestling promos. And what bigger wrestling promo than Jim Harbaugh returns just in time to play the Buckeyes on November 25th in a game that I think 20 million people could potentially watch. 17 million watched it last year, so that number's not out of the question for me.
So if it was just what you're saying you felt like it should be from day one, do they have to wait on Michigan to respond? Do we see the reports that they're taking it to court almost immediately for an injunction? If in fact, like if it was agreed to last week, would we be hearing these types of reports this week leading up to what everyone expects, which is an announcement from Petitti at some point?
And unfortunately, I think that's the road Michigan's going to take because you're dealing with Jim Harbaugh. You're dealing with one of the most combative coaches in the country, right? And not only combative, but unpredictable. I mean, I've always said that if you're asking me to predict the NCAA plus Jim Harbaugh, I didn't take a math class in high school that could calculate that. It's too hard. So it will be interesting to see how Michigan reacts. And the general sense I get is that they're going to fight back because this isn't just any other season. This is their best team from my vantage point, probably since 1997 when they went into Penn State that year and the national championship talk really began because they went into Happy Valley and won 34-8. And that started Charles Woodson's Heisman campaign. So I think they're going to fight back. And then this mess, in 2 weeks, we could still be talking about it. And I'm not sure anybody wants that.
Bill, to your point about the theatrics of this and what that Michigan-Ohio State game could be from a television viewership standpoint, Tony Petitti's previous job, television executive, that could factor in also. 2 games, and then coming back for that one would be quite the triumphant return, setting up that matchup, which a bunch of people are already going to watch. I want to ask you about a team that not many people are rushing to watch on television. That's Iowa, because of that offense. The whole Kirk Ferentz, Brian Ferentz story all year has been incredible to follow. Now that Brian Ferentz is on his way out, what do you see as what's next for Kirk Ferentz? We know that he said he's coming back, planning to coach multiple years from now. What do you think about the direction that program is heading now with a team that still only has 2 losses, even with that atrocious offense?
A team that may very well end up in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game with that atrocious offense and amazing defense on the other end. I don't know if you saw that Sickos Committee silent film of the Northwestern Iowa
it's
game
amazing.
Yes.
Perfect.
I was in tears laughing, guys.
Yes.
Like I was literally doubled over laughing. And what it comes down to for Iowa is what do you want to be? I mean, do they want to really do what they need to do and fundamentally look at that offense and what they can be? But I also think that is a self-aware program from the standpoint of they know they're not going to get a bunch of 4- and 5-star kids to Iowa. They know NIL isn't quite the game changer for them that it might be for other schools. And for all the jokes that we make about Kirk Ferentz and maybe Brian Ferentz, his winning percentage is as good as anybody. Now, that will change in the new Big Ten when you're adding those West Coast schools like USC, Oregon, Washington. And it may be difficult because, if Washington and Iowa played, how many points do you think it would take for Washington to win? And I don't think more than 20, and they could still score like they did against Michigan State earlier this season.
Bill Bender has been our guest. Great perspective and analysis of what's been going on in Ann Arbor and beyond with the Sporting News. Check out his great work there, covering all things from coast to coast. Bill, thank you so much for the perspective today, and let's catch up soon.
Well, let's do it. You guys are the best. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Bill Bender there. And, yeah, I mean, Chad, what he said should be the idea or maybe the penalty handed down from day one is what you said you probably expect. But since then, there's been a lot of chatter about what Michigan may do or may not do, and a lot of the threats sound a lot like any program. Even James Madison is threatening to lawyer up if they're not allowed in the postseason. That's normally the response of the NCAA. I'm curious of how the response will be from the Big Ten compared to the NCAA when those threats are leaked.
It's a big opportunity to show some teeth if you're Tony Petitti. It's also one that you don't want to overreact.
Right.
And you don't want facts to come out later that show that you were way off in your decision making. Kevin Warren went big on a decision at one point. I'm not going to say the word that was involved in it, but that later he fell flat on his face with that decision, thinking he was being tough and strong in the moment, and he was anything but. So Tony Petitti has to guard against that as well.
Coming up, we air our top grievance of the week. Primary complaints is next. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick network rolls on.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in the land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human being. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
I made the call to end the Me Too movement. And today I'm going to continue making that case. And that's just a way to further taunt these women, to make them feel less than, to make them realize that this has just become a big joke. Deion Sanders is the Donald Trump of football.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing, and we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting. That was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only 1 or 2. That's rubbish, and we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, a bold taste of a Southern legend.
6th and Peabody are located with EHOP Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Hot Mike with Hunter Withrow rolls on across the OutKick network. Chad,
big fan of Bill Bender, by the way.
Yeah,
good dude.
Yeah. Great guy, great perspective.
Yeah,
knows the conference well. Coming up, Tank Williams will join us, former NFL safety, now college football and NFL analyst.
I do wonder, by the way, just how nutty it would get in the SEC if this was a story there, because of Lane Kiffin and some different wild cards that would speak out a lot more, and then the dirt throwing that would happen amongst the coaches in the conference through back alley media members / NIL collectives.
I've
and
changed my
else.
line of thinking on this a bit.
I'd love to see it.
Because Sankey could get them to shut up. He got Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban to shut up immediately.
Yeah.
So if he wants all things quiet on the Southeastern front, he normally gets that. And he can do it behind the scenes. Well, you know what I mean? Like, they've been very vocal because it's the Big Ten, which we know Sankey has always had the rivalry with Kevin Warren. And the television money, the TV revenue, all that, because they were competing.
See, they're publicly being quiet in the Big Ten. They're publicly following the Sankey line of thinking.
That's what I mean.
And what they're doing. But in the SEC, I think the Fed reports to different media members across the conference would be so much more on every program that's out there.
But I don't know if Kiffin may chirp off a couple of times, but he wouldn't be as vocal about, targeting. If that's not targeting, I don't know what is, blah, blah, blah. He's commenting on everything unless Sankey steps in, which he did against the Don of the SEC, Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher, right?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking back to last year and thinking, well, I mean, he brought up the policy about, the code of conduct and how to represent this quote-unquote sportsmanship policy. And that's what he referenced then. He would do the same thing, right? And then you still have the Big Ten coaches would be chirping off
I just think that
more.
It would be...
No one would be anonymous in the Big Ten about the SEC.
To be clear, though, about the counter from Michigan, it is... We're not denying that we did this, but we handed over info that Rutgers and Ohio State conspired with Purdue to have our signals last year.
Right.
They didn't go about it illegally. No one's reporting that they presented facts that they had staff members illegally at games videotaping what was going on at games that weren't theirs off-site. But that's the response from Michigan. My point, if it was the SEC, I think an atom bomb would go off within the conference, and every single coach would spill the beans on another school and what happens at another school or what happened at a place they coached at.
Jimbo Fisher tried to do that last year. Like, hey, what if we start unveiling what's really going on up in Tuscaloosa? Remember this?
Yeah, but he did.
Vague exactly, because Sankey came over the top.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that First off, Jimbo Fisher never would have done that because it just would have made him look bad. That made him look bad because he was there too.
Well, but
he was a part of the staffs that did that.
I know, but he did it publicly though. The Big Ten coaches are doing it privately.
I know, but you see what I'm saying? I'm talking about feeding media members anonymous reports.
Yeah.
I think if this happened in the SEC, every single program, minus maybe Vanderbilt, there would be someone saying, Tennessee did this, Kentucky did this, Missouri did this, Arkansas did this, Auburn did this. The finger pointing would be insane.
Yes, but
in the
anonymous,
SEC right
just
now,
like the Big Ten.
Yeah,
and that's where I've changed my line of thinking.
But it's just the two programs, or three, I guess, with Purdue accepting
but it's not
the signs.
It's not, because if it's just those three, the other coaches that are pissed off that it's happening at Michigan would be demanding discipline for those guys too.
Right, but do you see what I'm saying? The difference in the two conferences.
Yes.
I believe had this gone on the SEC, that report that came out yesterday from ESPN about what Michigan turned over, I think if anyone got, let's say Rutgers and Ohio State. Let's say that is Georgia and Florida. That has the finger point. I think people at Georgia and Florida would feed their media things on Tennessee, Kentucky. Then before you know it, the entire conference is implicated.
It would be Georgia and like Kentucky or Georgia. I'm trying to be relevant to Rutgers here. Georgia and Arkansas.
Well, regardless, they would carpet bomb the entire conference. They would blow themselves up. That's what would happen in the SEC. That's my guess.
Except...
but they would do it anonymously through separate reports of team websites that would have the info.
Except what would Sankey do behind the scenes compared to Petiti? That's really what it comes down to.
We don't know what Petiti's done yet.
What Michigan has admitted that Connor Stallions has done this. They are denying everything else. They only suspended one dude.
Yeah, now he's resigned.
Right. Well,
yeah.
Asked to. After Petiti met with them last week, that news came out. Point being, they're standing behind, and not just standing behind their head coach, the coordinators, anyone else that's been associated with Connor Stallions. And, oh, by the way, they're also coming over the top with a response and threatening for the court to lay down an injunction. That's the other part of it. So they're not denying it, Chad. I agree with you. They're also not saying that anyone else had any knowledge or connection to it. And if you want to prove it, go right ahead and try, because we know you can't. They're mocking them in a way by saying, hey, we're going to take you to court and we're going to play anyway, so deal with that and do whatever you want, but it's not going to matter. Mock may be strong. They're coming over the top with a very hardline stance on, we're backing the program. We're not admitting anything other than the guy who's not here. And he was in violation of the NCAA rule. We're not in violation of a sportsmanship policy. And if you think we are, prove it, that anyone knew that what this guy was doing, whose lawyer and Connor Stallions have said Harbaugh didn't know.
Yeah,
that's what's intriguing about what Petiti has in front of him and why he waded into this, where it may have been like ankle deep, and now it's, waist high.
I want to find out today. I really hope that we have news to share before the end of the show. I called it yesterday. We had the report this morning that they're going to get something back from Michigan today. This stuff should start to leak any minute, and we're going to have news about it hopefully before the end of the show.
But we won't have Petiti's response.
So Nicole Auerbach has tweeted that, no, I don't, probably not, but they got to get this thing done before Saturday. I mean, they're going to travel to Happy Valley on Friday. So you would think
you can let him coach, and then if it's 2 games, it's Ohio State.
Right, but I'm saying if there's anything that's going to happen in these games, get the response from Michigan, sleep on the damn thing, and come back tomorrow and say what's going to happen, because they got to fly to a game on Friday. Yeah. And for Michigan's sake, come up with what you're going to do and let them know. I would say that for their benefit also. Nicole Auerbach has tweeted out that 11 Michigan lawmakers have come together, the Michigan House of Representatives, and they've decided to urge Tony Petiti to not take any rash actions during this time. Hutton, this is where sports is so great, is when the local lawmakers get involved and start threatening things.
It's what Virginia, what James Madison is threatening.
Oh, it's what, I mean, if you remember.
Everyone's doing it now.
If you remember Shiano Sunday with Tennessee, there were local lawmakers that, I will sign a bill that will not allow this person that was attached to a child molestation ring at Penn State be the coach. I mean, this grandstanding stuff, whatever. Who cares?
It's the idea, it's the threat, not the follow through.
Yeah,
I
do not care what local Michigan fans that have been elected to public office are drafting a statement saying to Tony Petiti in the Big Ten. Something that is completely out of their realm. Worry about roads in your state or whatever it is that's on the docket today, and keep your heads out of Michigan football. This is so stupid when politicians start to draft statements because their schools are in trouble. It's very college sports, and I'm here for that part of it, but it's also just much ado about nothing.
The injunction's happening, right? That's ultimately what everyone
Well,
realized.
that was always the thing with like Texas, Texas going to the SEC. Well, the Texas people and the Texas Senate and politicians and Texas A&M people are going to fight. And what happened? Texas is in the SEC. They decided, and they're there, even though Texas A&M never wanted them there. So,
well, most politicians are the Texas fans, though, right?
Yeah, it's not news at all.
They can complain all they want to in Ann Arbor. We can complain all we want weekly. It's time for primary complaint.
It's time to air our top grievance of the week.
You can complain all you want.
My job is so unfulfilling. Don't run away from your feelings.
It's time for Hot Mike's primary complaint.
Guys, my primary complaint this week is Al Michaels, who continues to respond to critics who are saying, and critics being the vast majority of football fans who are watching Thursday Night Football, that Al Michaels isn't the same enthusiastic, great, exciting play-by-play announcer like he was for Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football. He continues to respond, most recently with the New York Post, saying, hey, there's not a lot different than the Al Michaels from 3 years ago, 10 years ago. But and he continues to say, Chad, that he's calling the same game virtually the same type of Brock. It's simply not. And at 78 years old, you can admit he's lost the fastball. A routine 3-yard run also sounds like the explosive, big game-changing play many times. And there's a big difference in why he should realize that the critics that continue to jump on board with the idea that he's not the same guy and he's not energetic and he's just coming across as bored on Thursday Night Football, which, by the way, he's averaging around roughly $1 million per game. He's got a year left on his contract next year. He says he's not retiring. The reason why I would, if I'm him, be like, you know what, they're probably onto something now. It's now year 2. It's because we didn't hear this and he wasn't having to respond to anyone prior to making this jump to Thursday Night Football. Have some self-awareness and stop responding to every single critic whenever the media critic and the columnist give you a ring and ask you about what everyone's saying, which is very consistent now. That's my primary complaint.
Yeah, if everyone is saying it, every critic out there saying the same thing, there may be some validity to it.
I love him, by the way.
Yeah,
he's my favorite announcer, but
he's different.
Yes,
he's different.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not because he's not remembering things, and it's just the energy behind the call that he's denying that has changed all that much.
Speaking of energy, there is sorry, Davey.
I was just going to add real quickly. I mean, I wouldn't have much energy either if I was calling the 2-7 Bears game against the 1-7 Panthers.
What if I paid you $1 million to call that game?
Yeah.
Would you then have energy? You
Right.
better have energy.
Maybe a little bit more than I would.
If I'm Amazon, I'd be saying, I want you to treat this thing like it's Michael Phelps
How about
going
calling,
for a record gold medal in the Olympics, Al.
A week from tomorrow, Ravens-Bengals on Thursday Night Football.
That's a good one.
Hutton and I call high school state championship games, and we are enthused about it. These are NFL games. He's calling for $1 million. So I don't buy it's a bad NFL game. So what? You're making $1 million to do it.
They're not all bad, by the way.
This is your dream, Al. This is what you've done your whole career.
A lot
you
of them
can
are
show, you can fake a little bit of enthusiasm. I think they've done something to his microphone, by the way. I've talked about this before. The audio quality of that broadcast is different. Herb Street sounds different. He's not as bad as Al Michaels, the lack of enthusiasm, but he even sounds different on it. Anyway, I'll go quick on this one.
You can't turn down the meter of enthusiasm, though, on a microphone.
No, but I'm saying it sounds quiet. The mix is different than in most games. I don't know. It's hard to explain. We got a minute left, so I'll go fast here. My complaint is how every alarm has now turned into a false alarm. And an example happened in this studio yesterday. 45 minutes before the show, we're in here preparing, getting ready for Hot Mic, and a fire alarm goes off. You know what the reaction was, that fire alarm? Annoyance. That was the reaction from all of us in the studio and everyone in there. There could have been a fire. An alarm was going off. Not one person moved. Not one person in the actual bar area moved. Not one person in the studio moved. I am guilty of this. I didn't think it was anything. I thought someone pulled the alarm. If someone's pulling the alarm so much that every alarm is treated as a false alarm, what is the use of a fire alarm if there's an actual fire and no one budges an inch when that alarm sounds? That is my primary complaint.
If he dies, he dies.
Ivan Drago.
Guys, my primary complaint, I feel like every week we could probably do something around the world of driving your vehicle. My big one this week is the acceleration ramp. It's called the acceleration ramp for a reason. It's because you're supposed to accelerate as you get on this ramp. I'm trying to merge into traffic on I-40 West, and you're going 25 when everyone else is going 65 as you get up onto the interstate. It's problematic whenever you're not going to be able to merge when somebody's going to be able to ram you in the back there. Speed up, people. Learn how to drive. It's not that difficult. That's my primary
Don't
complaint.
ram Davey in the back. That's the lesson I took from that. Don't even think about it.
Speed up.
That's right.
And then merge properly.
Merge quickly.
Coming up, there's an NFL record that's going to be set this weekend as the Giants take on the Cowboys, and it's not the wide receiver that they just signed to the practice squad. That's next on Hot Mic with Hunter Withrow across the OutKick Network.
Dabo Swinney ripping his own fans. Dabo Swinney at Clemson is, I don't know, they tell me that he's the guy that doesn't like the transfer portal because he's made some comments that weren't exactly supportive of it. Dabo Swinney has done a job at Clemson that very few thought could be done. Clemson is a town about this big. Well, I better do this, not that, because that's like a white power sign idiots say. But it's about that big. The state is South Carolina. The state is not Clemson. So, but Dabo Swinney put Clemson in rarefied air. If you, a couple years ago, were going to name me the 3 best college football teams before Georgia's run here, you'd say Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. That's kind of who it always came down to. It felt like. So Dabo Swinney is now the victim of something that is good in one way, but it's bad in another. Incredible expectations of your fan base, meaning 10-2 ain't good enough. It just ain't. You can say whatever you want, but it just ain't. We got to be better. What? We're not in the college football playoff? What? We're not winning a national champion? What? We're 4-2? That's only winning 67% of our games? Here's what Dabo had to say. If you don't go undefeated, people say you're losers, that you're terrible. Let me go this. Let me tell you something. This is why football coaches for years and years and years and years fought the college football playoff. We're at a point in time, and I hate that, where people, if you don't go undefeated, you're losers. You're terrible. It's just a terrible mindset. Honestly, maybe we need to lose a few games and lighten up the bandwagon. Sometimes the bandwagon get a little full. That's the one good thing about going through a little bit of so-called adversity, is that you really find out who's with you and who's not. That's all crap. Let me explain to you Dabo Swinney's day, can I? Dabo Swinney probably wakes up around 5:30. Dabo Swinney smokes shit, shower, shave, shampoo, goes to the office. Probably has a meeting at 7. Dabo Swinney then is probably in different meetings with players or recruits, or maybe the administration, going and maybe watching film, whatever. Then he has practice. Then after practice, he's doing the same thing. Then in the evening, he's making phone calls. Probably goes home around 10. At no point in time in his day, his week, his month, his year, is he finding out who's with us and who's not with us. It's not like there's a list. Now, maybe you find out what media member wants to rip you, but on a daily basis, a monthly basis, you're not finding out any of this crap. It's very simple. Coaches, if you want to know who's with you, understand that when you lose, nobody's really with you. If you want to know who's really with you, win. And then everybody's really with you. It's literally that simple. As my father used to say to me, Dan, we're with you, win or tie, and we ain't so sure about the tie. So shut up with that stuff, win some football games, and don't sweat it. Seriously, do yourself a favor. Work hard, grab yourself a glass of wine, go sit in your chair, and read a book instead of being on social media or worrying about who is with you and who is not with you.
Just like that, the second hour is here. How am I with Hutton Withrow? Across the OutKick Network, the Wednesday edition.
Show is flying by today, Hutton.
Yeah. Coming up, we've got Tank Williams, who will join us later, next hour. Former NFL safety, now a college football and NFL analyst. Always great whenever he has the chance to jump on. We'll talk both. Chad, you're going to ask about the alma mater.
I'll ask him about his Stanford Cardinal.
Yeah.
Getting it done against Deion.
Keeping them possibly out of the bowl?
I think it was Albert Einstein who said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. I agree. The Stanford talk has me remembering that I may be doing just that this week in Wrong Team Favorite as I continue to have 0 points. May God have mercy on my soul.
Chad, they had the Christmas
Jim Downey,
the Christmas decoration fest here at 6th and Peabody last night. Went on to like 2:30 in the morning. Do you think they were saying Merry Christmas or Merry Ballsmas?
I think half of them were saying Merry Christmas,
Like,
and the
go home
other
and
half
shave.
was saying that
Merry Ballsmas.
Those who know were saying Merry Ballsmas for sure. And that's what our friends over at Manscaped, they're saying right now. The holidays are approaching, but what if I told you the celebrations are starting early this year? Turns out the perfect gift does exist, and who else to bring it down your chimney than the leaders in below-the-waist grooming? Keep calm and let your balls jingle this season. I told you we're going for it. With Manscaped's brand new Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, featuring the new Lawnmower 5.0, watch all your wishes and mistletoe kisses come true. Look nice when you're going naughty by going to manscaped.com. Use the code HOTMIC for 20% off plus free shipping. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code HOTMIC at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Remember to use that code HOTMIC, all one word, if you are spelling challenged. That is HOTMIC, not like Magic Mike, not with a K at the end, Mike, M-I-C at the end. Get your jingle balls ready for the holidays with Manscaped.
Jingle all the way, Chad.
Jingle all the way. A great Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Jingle All the Way. I may have to watch that. I need to revisit that film this holiday season. It's about time for Home Alone, that's for sure. My annual viewing of Home Alone is about to happen.
It is time. Chad, Martavis Bryant is back with the Cowboys. Last time he played a down was in 2018, Week 10, and he's since been reinstated. He had a handful of tryouts. Cowboys were one of them, yes, but also the Titans and I believe a couple of others. He's back with the Cowboys on the practice squad, which means another team could claim him unless Dallas wants to elevate him to the active roster for a minimum of 3 weeks. But he's back as some wide receiver insurance for them. And we will see, by the way, an NFL record this weekend. And it's not maybe Martavis Bryant's elevated on game day, maybe not. But the NFL record is going to be with Tommy DeVito, who will become the 10th rookie to start an NFL game in a single season. That will become the most ever. That's where it does not feel like 10, considering the mindset for me has been, well, there's 3 quarterbacks, and we're just now seeing Will Levis get to that point.
Well, let's also be perfectly clear about that stat. That is a very bad thing for the NFL.
Yeah.
And it's been a very bad thing this year for the NFL.
Well, not just rookies. You're right, it's bad. The veteran quarterbacks aren't really putting up a ton of numbers by and large. The offenses hasn't been great. Defenses that should not have the advantage are playing okay against some rules that are set up for the offense to win. That's surprising. You got Josh Allen throwing all kinds of picks. You've got Tua against good teams, averaging 17 points per game. Where are we headed with this? Which quarterback's actually going to get hot and be consistent with it? Right now, it's Joe Burrow and Cincinnati. It took a while for them to get going offensively because of his injury. It's not a good offensive league right now.
And the league is just so much healthier when you get to the point where more than half the league has truly established franchise quarterbacks, where you're looking at them thinking, this guy's here for more than 2 years. Whether they're in the middle of their career, towards the end, or in the beginning, right? Where you feel confident saying, I can see a scenario where this team has their quarterback for the next, 2, 3, 4 years. That's a better spot for the league to be in. I don't think you can say that when you look out across the league right now. There's just so many either stopgap situations at quarterback, rookies or second-year players that you're not fully invested in or bought into so far. There's too much uncertainty at that position right now, and it's led to poor offense. There's a lot of other factors, too, that's led to that, but offense is down this year in the NFL.
Yeah, and we're talking a ton about C.J. Stroud this past weekend, but the weekend prior, he ends up losing a game against a team he shouldn't lose against, and that's Carolina, right? Awful performance. But no one's talking about the bad performance because, again, I think it's routine right now that you see field goal type games, offense to offense. And that sucks.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not all for no defense like we saw in Houston and Tampa either. But what we were seeing, it is tough right now for teams to put up 24 points, 22 points. Chad, the Titans would have 2 more wins if they scored on the road 17 points and 21 points. They'd have they'd be 5-3 instead of 3-5, and they can't muster that with Ryan Tannehill, DeAndre Hopkins, and Derrick Henry.
Yeah, a score fest can be a fun game to watch, but I'm with you. You don't want it to look like two-hand touch with defenses not being able to do anything. To me, it's pretty simple. The best version of football is when I'm watching the game and I feel like all four major units of the game, one team's offense versus the other team's defense, one team's offense versus the other team's defense, those four are equally capable of striking. To me, that's the best version of football, to where you never feel like one side is completely out of it. And that could lead to high scoring. That could be low scoring also at times, but it doesn't feel like someone's helpless.
Yeah.
I've watched too many games this year where I feel like one side of the ball is helpless, and it's typically the offensive side of the ball that's been helpless at times. And that's not a good spot to be in terms of enjoyable football to watch. And we've seen too much of that across the NFL.
Chad, I joked yesterday. I'm like, did Minnesota really have to put out there that, yes, Joshua Dobbs will be the starting quarterback for them this upcoming weekend? No, they didn't. Not after what we saw on short notice yet again, where on short notice he doesn't just play good, he doesn't play well, and just manage an offense and put them in position in the fourth quarter to actually be around an element of leaving as the winner. He actually does it on the game-winning drive that he hadn't repped or practiced with his teammates, new teammates, all week. He's also giving credit to Creed in his Instagram post, expressing gratitude to Vikings fans. He put out a TikTok, I should say, where he edited himself into the Creed halftime performance on Thanksgiving. 2001 or 2002 is whenever that took place.
Yeah, and
where Scott Stapp was going higher.
Spliced in one of his touchdown runs, I think, and then with Creed and Scott Stapp. Underrated part of Josh Dobbs is his social media ability, because this is the second time, really the third time, that we've talked about something involving social media with him. Remember that they didn't have his jersey available in the Cardinals team store?
Right.
And he posted that, and then by that afternoon they had it available, and he was posting the new video where they had his jersey available for sale. Then, of course, what the Vikings did, it wasn't his account, but him entering the locker room as Kevin O'Connell was giving him props and telling the locker room to let him hear you as he walks in. That was amazing.
And he also responded to Micah Parsons, who said that he was going to put Dobbs' headshot on a dartboard that week, and then after the game, he was dodging darts based on his performance.
Yeah. So, underrated social media guy also. Got a career.
Well, and quarterback.
Got a career in media when he's done, if he wants it.
And quarterback at this point. Did you try to pick him up in fantasy?
No, I did not. Look, I love Josh Dobbs, and I hope this story continues, but prepare for the regression to the mean for Dobbs. I'm not saying he's going to crater and look like Zach Wilson at his worst anytime soon, but I don't see him winning games with 2 minutes left that often, right? It's going to have to be the right setup for the Vikings to really win with him.
They
moving
do
forward.
have a schedule coming up where they can be very competitive based on how they've been playing. And Justin Jefferson should be back sooner rather than later. He's eligible to return to practice now, but they can lengthen this as much as they want or have him ready to go whenever.
I look forward to having Armando Salguero on to ask him for a second straight week. You said they're dead completely. You saw the game. You saw the win on the road. Are they still dead? And I'm sure he'll probably say yes.
Are you buying into Dallas? Going back to them. But the nation loves watching them play on national TV.
27 million people, most watched game of the year was Dallas-Philadelphia late Sunday afternoon.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think the previous number one was Chiefs-Bears with Taylor Swift in attendance at Arrowhead in a 45-10 final. That tells you that the two matchups and the fan base is there, and the intrigue in both good NFC teams drew a massive number in a late afternoon kickoff.
In terms of buying Dallas, I feel the same way I did before the season. They've got a very good roster, and they still have Dak Prescott at quarterback, which means they're probably going to lose in the first playoff game they play. It's a playoff team that will not advance far.
Especially if they're going to play San Francisco. They've been knocked out the last 2 years.
Yeah, I just see them losing to, it's not a Super Bowl team. It's a very good team that will be a playoff team. that may win one game in the playoffs, but they're not going to the Super Bowl. I felt that way going into the season. I feel that way now about them.
Bomani Jones, with his podcast and just reading the report on the recap on awful announcing, doesn't feel as though that the NFL or the media covering the Damar Hamlin story with the Bills from what happened at the end of last season to the incredible return and process for him and how fast and quick he was back to the field. Not just back to the field, in pads, playing, making a roster. He doesn't think that's inspiring, or at least how it's being framed. Quote, now that everything has been made into a television show, the NFL has to stand in every way for that's good. And what they're trying to do is turn what happened with Damar Hamlin into a story of inspiration. There's nothing inspiring about what happened. That from Bomani Jones. Why do we recap what other people think if they're idiots? I feel like what we're doing is a recap show for media members who are just stupid. Why do we continue to do this every day?
Why does...
Can we play this audio clip instead of him saying this on his podcast, Chad?
I doubt it. I'm sure something bad would happen if we did that. Bomani Jones, so I kind of agree with the broader point of what he's saying, and let me explain why. I believe that where he's going is into a racial element of this that I completely disagree with, okay?
Which is what he does.
But, I mean, yeah, the NFL will drape themselves in the American flag. They will attach themselves to anything that makes them look good. That's not unlike every corporation, by the way, in business in America, right? They want to attach themselves to feel-good stories. The Damar Hamlin thing, to me, is still such an odd deal because no one will come out and say scientifically and medically exactly what happened. Like, Damar Hamlin doesn't even say exactly what happened.
No, he has. He's since said what happened.
Oh, he has?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that he had said that.
He told people that he had what was the condition?
What everyone thought it was, commotio cordis, or whatever it was.
But it took a while. You're right.
Yeah.
So to a point where people thought that it was a stand-in in the stands of him. Remember?
Well, I guess
like a body double.
Here's what I would say, that the way it's not bad for the NFL is the fact that if it was something that happens in the course of an NFL game is a horrific injury that is football caused and solely because of football, it's one that you watch and probably don't show, and then you don't really celebrate because it brings to light how violent a sport it is. This was something that happened in a contact sport that could have happened in a basketball game, could have happened in a baseball game, could have happened in any number of sports, right? So it wasn't football specific with the injury. But the way that people came together in the medical community around Damar Hamlin and saved his life, and then Damar Hamlin coming back and being an active member of the Buffalo Bills football team and dressing out and playing in one game this year, I mean, that is inspiring. So can I blame the NFL for wanting to attach themselves to that? Or for Damar Hamlin attaching himself to that? And for here's what's inspiring. Damar Hamlin opened up scholarships for the 10 people in Cincy that were the most around him and with the medical community, right?
Well, everyone was inspired to donate to his charitable causes.
That part is inspiring.
Yeah, this was in April whenever he said that the blow to the chest caused his heart to stop, a condition known as commotio cordis.
Look, if you're annoyed, right, like you're just saying like, okay, this was a very sad story that this guy went through this and he was playing football, and I am deep down, I'm bothered and annoyed that the NFL can take all of that and somehow profit from it, right? They make themselves look like they're heroes and heroic in this, and they drape themselves in this story that's otherwise not, inspiring or whatever, however you want to phrase it. I can kind of understand the broader point of what Bomani Jones is saying. Here's where I disagree with him, and I know what Bomani Jones is going for in this. He's race baiting, which he does all the time, and this goes back to this. Here is big, bad NFL with white billionaires making money off the backs of black players. And once again, they are being promoted and promoting themselves on the backs of black players and their struggle. And that's what I hate about it. That's really what he wants to say in all of this, right? Because he says it over and over again. He ties every story back into that. And that part I disagree with. But I mean, if I'm using critical thinking here, I mean, I get how someone can be, okay, we get it, right? The NFL is great. They're a savior. They did this, they did that. And being annoyed with attaching yourself to that story in that way, even though every company probably would have done the exact same thing.
Well, black or white, the NFL would have still tried to continue that game on Monday night. That would have happened. They didn't, because the coaches wouldn't do it, the players wouldn't do it. They want the sport to continue, and they're going to prop up every little thing.
It would have been interesting had he said that they still tried to play the game.
But Bomani Jones is Bomani Jones. This is a recap of the story.
Quote, a good state champion caliber high school boys team would smoke the best team in the WNBA. Then this weekend, after the video was posted and the critics, of course, came for him, he doubled down on what he said, posting this on X. Quote, it's sexist to say women's basketball players aren't as good as men's. That was a question, obviously. It's my opinion, and I'm putting $1 million behind it. If I'm wrong, the WNBA team can take my money and make more from one game than they do for the entire season. Okay, so let's get into this, because obviously there's a lot of people out there who are just assuming that Clay is being sexist, that he is trying to really punk the WNBA, because let's be honest, the ratings for the WNBA aren't great, which is exactly why Clay made the joke at the end of that. If you were to give them $1 million for losing the bet, that would be more than the WNBA would make regularly for one game under normal circumstances. But the fact remains that men and women biologically super different, and that's what he's talking about. We even look at a boys high school basketball team and the makeup of their players, what they're able to do, their size, their skills, and look at the WNBA players who are oftentimes much older. They're professional basketball players, but still, the level of competition would not at all be on the same playing field. So, Chris, let's get into that. What is your take on this? The fact that people would say that, Clay, you're being sexist, when reality remains men and women, super different, even at very different ages, different places in their careers, there would be no matchup whatsoever.
I don't even think it's questionable. I love that Clay took it to him. I think a lot of times silence speaks louder than words. The Las Vegas Aces haven't said anything in response yet. So, look, you're right. I dug into the rosters, the Las Vegas Aces, and then, look, I've spent some time training at IMG Academy. I work with athletes at a school called Lou High, which is one of the top programs in the country. And we have guards 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". We're on the Aces. The tallest players are 6'3" and 6'4", and those are their bigs. So they don't even have anybody to really account for the bigs on the male teams. And I don't know that it's how in any way is this a sexist thing to say. Yeah.
Well, I have a woman, I think, who will be able to help answer this question. She is super smart. She's super intelligent. I am a big fan of her. Everybody, you're also a big fan of her. We all are. It just has to be said. So let's go ahead and bring in the woman of the hour, Riley Gaines. Hello, Riley. I'm happy to see you again. I feel like I get to spend so much time with you these days.
I know, right? Very good to see you, and I will say it is rainy here as well, which just sucks.
Okay, so I know the last time we talked, you were like bouncing all over the place. Where are you right now?
I'm actually in Nashville, but headed to New York today. So I'll be on deck.
Okay, well, welcome. You get to go from rain to rain.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, Riley, let's get into the topic that we were just discussing. Obviously, Clay being a little bit sarcastic in the way that he framed the question, but he's saying he's willing to make a bet that the WNBA champions, still being the champions, professional basketball players, would not be able to hold a candle to any high school boys basketball team in the country. Is he being sexist, or is he just speaking facts that men and women are very different in terms of what they are capable of athletically?
Boom. Right there. It's not sexist to say men and women are different. Like you said, it's reality, it's truth, it's common sense, it's logic, it's reasoning. We all know it.
Coming up in an hour, Tank Williams will join us. We'll get into how many locker rooms does he feel like are truly believers in the path that they're on. I think a lot of it has to do with the trust that you have, of course, in the head coach, but also, going back to our discussion, Chad, a lot of bad quarterback play. There's not that many teams that have the quarterback that you trust. So how many locker rooms actually trust that they're in position to make a run?
It's also such a bad spot to be in if you just resign yourself to, I'm just going to do my job and not care.
Well, not care, but
well, when I say not care, you care about your own performance, but I'm saying when you lose that sense of we're in this together, we're striving to be better, we're striving to win, and you resign yourself to a sense of this is a rebuilding team, we're not going to win with this quarterback we have or whatever it may be. I just need to make sure I put out good film and I'm doing my job and that's all I can control.
Yeah.
I think mentally when you get to that point, that's not a good place to be in team sports.
Well, I guess what I'm really going to ask him is how many teams are like the New York Jets from last year? That you got the swagger defensively and you've got some really good playmakers, but everyone was admitting your quarterback away, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's motivated them specifically is the idea of Aaron Rodgers coming back, not that they're, maintaining with Zach Wilson. And I think there are definitely other teams like that. Like, does Minnesota believe? Are they truly in? Because with Kirk Cousins, they absolutely would be, given their record and where they stand.
And also to expound upon that question, and we'll talk to Tank about this, but just the impact of one quarterback coming into your team. We saw it with Aaron Rodgers with the Jets on Hard Knocks, but
yes.
I mean, how much confidence that can give every position group on your team. And Tank Williams, the guy who played in the secondary at safety, but when you feel like you've got the quarterback that's going to win you a game, how different that changes the mentality of everyone. Everyone is thinking differently and being more positive when you have that guy. That's a huge factor going into it. Hey, some news just dropping now in Major League Baseball. The LA Angels are hiring Ron Washington, Braves assistant coach, longtime manager also in Major League Baseball, to be their next manager. That is per John Heyman, who had that report.
Man, the merry-go-round of managers and coaches in Major League Baseball and the NBA never ends.
Ron Washington got a ton of credit for this Braves run also while he was an assistant coach there and the third base coach for the Braves. But there's a lot of videos of him doing his infield work with guys every day before they took the field. And he's a loved guy, beloved in that Braves clubhouse. So that's a loss for them. And the Angels have their guy.
Jet, so if you're looking at the College Football Playoff Committee's top 10, you're like, man, this looks very similar to last week. It's because it is. The top 8 haven't changed at all from last week. Ohio State, though, remains number 1, but they were number 1 last week because of their 2 good wins, right? Notre Dame, Penn State.
Yep.
Doesn't look as great based on their recent performance. And what does Georgia have to do to jump them in the poll to get to number 1? And I bring this up because of where Alabama is at 8. If Bama and Georgia maintain and Bama beats them in the SEC championship, can the SEC all of a sudden get 2 teams in? A month ago, there's no way I uttered that question. And I see a path here just based on Penn State is capable of beating Michigan. Michigan, we know, has been the more physical, dominant team in the trenches against Ohio State. And the merry-go-round there, plus what could happen in the Pac-12. Who knows what happens with Texas? And the fact that after that, all of a sudden, there's Alabama. And if Georgia's number 1 and Bama creeps up to 6 or 5, this version of the Nick Saban team that has flaws, he can win the argument this year compared to last year where they lose 2 games on the final play of each game. And he was laughed at because no team in the college football playoff with 2 losses has ever been a college football playoff team in the top 4. This year, with all their flaws and where we thought they were, the perception-wise, it's a much better argument based on the coaching job that he and his staff and the players have done over the course of the last month and a half.
Well, let's all just agree that for the rest of America, that's not the SEC.
Yeah.
The doomsday scenario is starting to take place. And that is if Georgia wins at home this week, they got a tough test, but they are a road win in Knoxville away from being clear to be undefeated going to Atlanta for the SEC championship.
And the number one team.
I think Alabama's there. That LSU win, they're not going to lose at Kentucky. They're not going to lose to Auburn this year. They are going to be in Atlanta with one loss. So then all of a sudden, if Alabama is able to win the SEC title and beat undefeated Georgia and give them one loss.
Like Georgia did on their first run.
You've got Alabama with one loss, SEC champ, Georgia with the one loss. Are you going to keep the two-time defending national champion that only has the one loss in the SEC championship game out of a 4-team college football playoff? I doubt it if you're comparing them with other one-loss teams. So then that's how you get 2 SEC teams into the college football playoff, which would anger everyone across America if that were to be the case. But I could see that happening now, the way things are playing out. I still think probably the most likely scenario is Georgia, they go ahead and win out. And they're in there as an undefeated SEC champion. But I don't ever get overly twisted up about these rankings right now because I look out on the horizon and say, well, Michigan, Ohio State will take care of itself. Michigan's got a big road game this week. If they can get that win against Penn State, it's all going to play itself out one way or another. And I think it's all going to come down to, which it does most years, we're going to be talking about 2 teams. There's going to be the 4th spot, and we're going to be debating 2 teams for that 4th spot. And one team is going to get in over the other, and there's not going to be this huge outcry because it's going to be tough to argue why that one team that gets in should be out over the other one. And that's where we're going to eventually get. Now, if you expand it out and we can show you what that 12-team playoff would look like next year, that's where I think, Hud, we're going to have even more debate about how this thing should play out when you get to teams 10 through 18 and look at them on what it'll look like a year from now.
And right now, the first-round matchups in the 12-team playoff, if it were in effect this year and not next year, currently based on the college football playoff rankings, Alabama would host Ole Miss, Michigan host Tulane, Oregon hosts Louisville, and Texas hosts Penn State. And then you'd have Alabama or Ole Miss advance to take on Ohio State. Washington would take on the winner of Michigan-Tulane. Florida State takes on either Oregon or Louisville, and the winner of Texas-Penn State would move on to take on Georgia.
Now, when you get to the 8, let me say this about this current bracket. The worst I've ever seen in any of these mocks. And I know this is what it would be right now.
Yeah.
But those for Alabama-Ole Miss rematch in Tuscaloosa, not the best possible matchup you could get. Michigan-Tulane, I don't care. Oregon-Louisville, bad. Texas-Penn State, that's got some sex appeal to it with those 2 programs. But getting to the next 8, keep that graphic up if you would, please. Getting to the next 8, that is where I think you get – let's look at that possibility, right? Ohio State, Alabama, Washington, Michigan, Florida State, Oregon, Georgia playing Texas or Penn State. That's great. Well, look, it's going to be fine. I'm just saying a year from now, if the host site games where you actually have teams hosting a game, if it's those – that's the worst I've seen of it.
But if
that's the floor, that's pretty good. And this is the worst I've seen of that so far.
But the floor is I care more about the 4 games on campus than I do those teams matched up with whoever they're paired with in a bowl game.
Right.
And it's not the college football playoff.
No, from an atmosphere standpoint, what I want to watch early on, I definitely want to watch the teams hosting the games.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you cannot go wrong with Ohio State, Bama, Washington, Michigan, Florida State, Oregon, Georgia, Texas. That's if chalk happens. That's when you get down to the 8. And after that first round, that's really good.
Really, the biggest beef I have here is Tulane's in, but James Madison wouldn't be. They're the unbeaten team, but they're ineligible this year. Good thing is, next year, fine. But again, the hypothetical would be this year they couldn't play in a New Year's Six bowl as the highest-ranked non-Power 5 school. So the debate right now, Chad, would be between, let's see, Oregon State, Tennessee, Missouri, and Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
Plus Kansas and Oklahoma now.
Right. And look, there's going to be a different set of teams there at some point.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Tennessee's not going to win out, I don't think, playing at Missouri and Georgia at home.
Just
Maybe
underneath
they do.
that next tier is Utah, LSU, Notre Dame, Arizona.
But point being, someone is going to play their way up and someone's going to play their way down in the last month of the season. And it's going to kind of work its way out. But I think with the added teams next year, it's going to lead to much more fun discussion. I'll be completely frank with you. I don't love talking about the top 4 teams in the country week to week in this deal. It's just kind of boring. I think it's very obvious who the top 6 are right now. There's not going to be room for much debate. It stayed the same from a week ago. And I see this and I think it's going to play itself out. And there's not going to be room for a lot of discussion. A year from now, there's going to be a hell of a lot of discussion of teams 8 through 20 on that list. And there's going to be so many resumes to look at and comparison points and teams with 2 losses to compare. And I think that's fun. I don't know about you, but I like March Madness and I like Selection Sunday because it's fun to point to the differences in the resumes of these teams that are on the bubble. I think that's going to be an appealing part of this new process.
It is fun.
I think the 4 teams has been pretty boring, quite frankly, when you get down to them to compare 4 and 5. There's not been a ton of room for debate.
Well, what will
there
open it
hasn't
up
been
is
a big
the portal.
controversy.
Don't change the portal rules then, because it will be very similar to. I mean, instead of we know the top 6, I think we'll know the top 9 or 10 practically every year based on who's coaching. The other thing too is, are we going to see more 2-loss teams on the national landscape instead of Bama on the mid-afternoon or primetime spot for kickoff if they're the unbeaten school taking on whoever, right? If it's 3-loss A&M early in the season against Alabama, right now that's the 2:30 kickoff on CBS, right? Are we going to see more of Penn State, Louisville, Oregon State, Ole Miss, and Pac-12 for that matter in marquee time slots?
Hutton, you mentioned
Probably
the transfer
not.
portal, and this reminded me of this, something I've wanted to hit. I sent this to you guys yesterday.
Oh, yeah. The reverse problem.
Oh, my goodness. NC State quarterback M.J. Morris, who has led the Wolfpack to victories in the last 2 weeks in big games over Clemson and Miami. He has showcased himself, and he has now told his coaches, I don't want to play anymore because I want a red shirt so I can transfer. After receiving a scholarship from NC State, playing for NC State, doing well enough to win, and now suddenly he's just taking himself out of the lineup. This should anger everyone. This is the downside of the transfer portal. Are you kidding me? This kid who's been given an opportunity is now saying, I don't know that I want to play in this offense anymore. Take me out of the game. Put the dude you benched, by the way, who's Brennan Armstrong, who's like a 7th-year player who transferred in from Virginia, who got benched, came to be the starter for 1 year, gets benched for this kid who does well, and now he says, pull me, I want a red shirt, put the guy you bench back in. That's troublesome. That's a problem. This is when you get and I hate when it's all one side or the other on these things. When you get the college football writers who tell you, this is what you got to give autonomy to the players, and they need all the power, and they need all the say, just like coaches. And no, because this is what ends up happening at times. This is a negative story that's not being covered by many people that we'll cover on this show. That's a problem. That is a problem for M.J. Morris. That's a problem for NC State. That could be a problem for any other college football program. I hate this. Look, if you want to transfer at the end of the year and go somewhere, fine. You're trying to save your eligibility because you might want to leave for a team that you were fine signing with and playing with this year and starting the last 2 weeks. I hate this story.
And it's based on the timetable of how many games he's played, right?
Yeah, it's because he wants to save the whole year. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. On the flip side of things, you have, the NFL mentality where if you skip out on your team's bowl game, it doesn't hurt you, right? You decide to sit out. Think about being the team that recruits him now, because you wouldn't sit out unless you know kind of where you're going within the structure, right, of the portal.
Yeah.
Why would you want someone that's willing to do that after accepting the scholarship the way he did, only to say, you know what, peace out. I'm going to keep myself healthy.
Well, this is such a look. I get that coaches are desperate and they're trying to save their
Sure.
jobs.
No
and
doubt.
if he's got talent, they're going to take him.
Yep.
But I don't want this kid coming to my program.
I wouldn't.
If I'm someone else. But someone that's desperate, that's already been talking to him, that maybe he was recruited out of high school somewhere else, he's going to save himself for that team.
Chad, Adam Rittenberg
makes me mad.
Says Michigan has sent its response to the Big Ten, and now Tony Petitti must decide how to proceed with potential discipline. We'll react to the details of this next on Hot Mic.
Dabo Swinney ripping his own fans. Dabo Swinney at Clemson is, I don't know, they tell me that he's the guy that doesn't like the transfer portal because he's made some comments that weren't exactly supportive of it. Dabo Swinney has done a job at Clemson that very few thought could be done. Clemson is a town about this big. Well, I better do this, not that, because that's like a white power sign idiots say. But it's about that big. The state is South Carolina. The state is not Clemson. So, but Dabo Swinney put Clemson in rarefied air. If you, a couple years ago, were going to name me the 3 best college football teams before Georgia's run here, you'd say Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. That's kind of who it always came down to. It felt like. So Dabo Swinney is now the victim of something that is good in one way, but it's bad in another. Incredible expectations of your fan base, meaning 10-2 ain't good enough. It just ain't. You can say whatever you want, but it just ain't. We got to be better. What? We're not in the college football playoff? What? We're not winning a national champion? What? We're 4-2? That's only winning 67% of our games? Here's what Dabo had to say. If you don't go undefeated, people say you're losers, that you're terrible. Let me tell you something. This is why football coaches for years and years and years and years fought the college football playoff. We're at a point in time, and I hate that, where people, if you don't go undefeated, you're losers. You're terrible. It's just a terrible mindset. Honestly, maybe we need to lose a few games and lighten up the bandwagon. Sometimes the bandwagon get a little full. That's the one good thing about going through a little bit of so-called adversity is that you really find out who's with you and who's not. That's all crap. Let me explain to you Dabo Swinney's day, can I? Dabo Swinney probably wakes up around 5:30. Dabo Swinney smokes shit, shower, shave, shampoo, goes to the office. Probably has a meeting at 7. Dabo Swinney then is probably in different meetings with players or recruits or maybe the administration, and maybe watching film. Whatever. Then he has practice. Then after practice, he's doing the same thing. Then in the evening, he's making phone calls. Probably goes home around 10. At no point in time in his day, his week, his month, his year, is he finding out who's with us and who's not with us. It's not like there's a list. Now, maybe you find out what media member wants to rip you, but on a daily basis, a monthly basis, you're not finding out any of this crap. It's very simple. Coaches, if you want to know who's with you, understand that when you lose, nobody's really with you. If you want to know who's really with you, win. And then everybody's really with you. It's literally that simple. As my father used to say to me, Dan, we're with you, win or tie, and we ain't so sure about the tie. So shut up with that stuff. Win some football games and don't sweat it. Seriously, do yourself a favor. Work hard, grab yourself a glass of wine, go sit in your chair and read a book instead of being on social media or worrying about who is with you and who is not with you.
6th and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Chad, Adam Rittenberg saying that Michigan has submitted their response to the Big Ten. Their rebuttal for being notified by the Big Ten they could face discipline for violating the sportsmanship policy. But no details yet.
When is the leak coming on what
exactly
the punishment was that Michigan has responded to?
Michigan hasn't hesitated to push details on trying to be heavy-handed.
Yeah, these are good reporters. Pete Thamel, Adam Rittenberg, Nicole Auerbach. They're getting information from Michigan.
But also the Wolverine with On 3. They're getting that same info too and reporting on that. This will be out. This will be a swift reporting cycle on this.
I feel like Michigan's waiting to leak it based upon what they'll leak it the moment they get unfavorable news from the Big Ten based on their response.
Or if they just get a response like, okay, we're going to go back and consider this now.
We're going to huddle. We're going to huddle and get back with you.
Because
I just still think, the timing is working out sort of how I predicted this afternoon. I keep thinking that they're going to have to come back with something final tomorrow. Right? Even if they've got the response back from Michigan now, they're going to have to then come back on Thursday and say, we read your response, but here's what's going to happen. We're still going to go with the same penalty or whatever it is.
The other thing that could happen, though, there's no timetable on when a decision has to be made. It's just that discipline could occur if you're Petiti and you have all these different things circulating. Now, do you want to – because keep in mind, too, the NCAA notified the Big Ten that the connections to and the allegation that there were connections to the private investigation firm and Ryan Day were not true. It was just a rumor. There's nothing factual to back that up. The NCAA informed Petiti about that. If they've got more information, they need to give and hand over anything that they've been able to uncover throughout this process. They've been on campus longer than Petiti was, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So, and they're helping this because, they're just going through the process of this timetable that's ridiculous. But also because you can actually appeal the decision from the NCAA. Whatever decision's made by this committee,
they don't have much recourse.
There's no appeal. The recourse would just be through a judge, right? A court issued.
Oh, by the way, there's a top 10 matchup this weekend.
Right.
We're going into a game at Penn State. It's not like they're playing Illinois this weekend. They've got Penn State on the road. So I'd want to know something. If I'm Jim Harbaugh, if I'm the players, if I'm the program, I'm thinking, let's get whatever this response situation is over with so we know how to proceed.
Well, as other things get reported, Dave will send it to us here in real time. The story in Foxborough is so intriguing to me because, what was it, 2.5 weeks ago now? Vrabel's up there. He's going into the Patriots Hall of Fame, and the same weekend, it's reported, months after the fact, that Belichick had agreed to a contract extension, lucrative contract extension. What wasn't reported was the length of said contract extension, but soon after it was reported it was lucrative because the assumption is he's going in the final year of his deal this year. Soon after that was reported that it's not his final year based on an extension. It could be a year, it could be 2, whatever. Albert Breer was like, what I'm told is while it is lucrative, there's still a scenario where the Patriots could part ways with Belichick after this season, regardless of whatever extension's out there. So he's on the hot seat list. But he's been on the hot seat list. Just go back, 2 months ago when Tom Curran told us, I would say we're accurate in the fact that the rumors are more than just rumors and speculation based on the sentiment of ownership. Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft. Chad, the firing I don't think is happening. By the way, Ben Volen, who put out the report that there were 2 sources close to the Patriots that told him that a home run hire to replace Bill Belichick would be Mike Vrabel. He's also put out the report, rumor, whatever you want to put into, speculation, that it is very important for Belichick to win this weekend in Germany against Indianapolis. And then I immediately start laughing to myself, thinking, are they going to let him back on the charter back home from Germany after a loss to Indianapolis?
You're staying in Germany, Bill.
Yeah.
Enjoy the Wiener Schnitzel.
Columnist here locally, Joe Rexroad, for The Athletic, he had the great line. He's like, Belichick postgame, if he loses, it's just, instead of on to Cincinnati, it's on to JFK. Solo.
He starts to down a Das Boot in Germany. He has his own beer fest.
But think about that. How quickly we've gone from GOAT, he's going out without Brady, but he's going out to GOAT to you need to win in Germany against Indianapolis.
And
I'm
also,
not buying
all of these pieces, that's the title something like the top 6 landing spots for Bill Belichick next year. Well, teams that would be interested in Bill Belichick next year. Is crazy to read these headlines and these stories.
Florio, though, it's not crazy to think they could part ways based on just the friction that has been there for about a year and a half, 2 years with Kraft and Belichick behind the scenes. You just feel it. And Kraft's not saying anything, right? But I wouldn't fire him. I would trade him. And Florio's put out there last week that the Commanders could be trying to make an offer for him. And then you'd have to trade for Vrabel, hypothetically, given the rumor mill that's circulating.
It's interesting to see where all this goes and who really has the right source. I think that's a pretty tricky market to master from a media standpoint. Tom Curran's pretty good,
and a coach that's tricky to replace.
I think Mike Reese. There's good people that cover that beat, and cover that team. But it's also a very good organization. You know what very good organizations are good at? Keeping secrets. And they're very good at keeping things under wraps and not having a ton of leaks. So
they are.
I'm interested as much as what's going to happen with Bill Belichick as who is the leak? Who are these reporters talking to? And how close are they to the situation? And are they getting accurate information? I know this, though, for a fact. He has been a disaster since Tom Brady left. So however you want to slice that pie and you want to put the blame cake on whoever, he's been bad. That organization has gone straight downhill.
And since McDaniels
since
left
he's tried to do this without since he's tried to do this without Tom Brady, it's not worked. So I could understand Robert Kraft saying, guys won a bunch of Super Bowls. He's figured it out before, he'll figure it out again. We're staying with him. And I can completely understand him saying, yeah, it's not working. See,
you know what was also complete crap was Brady's final year there.
Yeah.
He looked done in Foxborough in the wild card loss to Tennessee compared to what we saw the following year in Tampa.
Yeah.
And that was also trash offensively. Completely remade in Tampa. Meanwhile, not the case in New England. Other hot seat discussion, and far, as far as firing is concerned, far more believable. Number one, Matt Eberflus with Chicago. Totally buy it.
Gone.
Likely gone. Ron Rivera, gone.
Likely gone.
Todd Bowles in Tampa. Yes. Brandon Staley in Los Angeles. Absolutely. They're 4-4. They've been winning more than I thought they would at this point in the season, given how they started and given how they lose close games.
I think they have to win a playoff game for him to keep his job. It's not just make the playoffs. I think given what they gave up last year in Jacksonville in that blown game, I think they have to win a playoff game for him to be safe.
And his defense, awful.
Defense looked great against Zach Wilson.
Yeah. Zach Wilson looked great against Denver, too, remember?
Yeah, Zach Wilson looked like he was playing for Brian Ferentz.
But as far as hot seat, they have Bill Belichick with a hotter seat than Arthur Smith right now at CBS.
And you know what?
I wouldn't.
Their team is bad.
Yeah, they're awful.
And it's been, how long now has Tom Brady been gone?
4 years.
And they've been bad? This is year 3 for Arthur
2019
Smith.
was final season.
I'm putting them kind of on equal footing. Granted, I get the resumes between the two. But
who do you trust to actually get it right versus not as a head coach?
I don't know that I can firmly trust Bill Belichick without Tom Brady to get it right. And I'm just being completely honest. He hasn't been good without Tom Brady.
What about a top 5 pick? Right now they have the 5th pick in the draft. You see what I'm saying, though? Like, it wouldn't be Mac Jones. And it wouldn't be a 6th-round quarterback either.
Again, I can understand them saying,
I'm with you.
We're going to let you draft another quarterback and try to get it right with him. And I can understand Robert Kraft saying, I've seen enough. You're gone. Let's go in a different direction.
Jonathan Gannon with the Cardinals, I don't see that.
No.
Why
would he be on the hot seat?
This is just a top 10.
He's doing his job to lose.
Not just that, but doing it where it doesn't seem like it's on purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been far more competitive to begin the year than I ever thought. And they're getting Kyler Murray back, and they're risking a $90 million injury guarantee by doing so this year versus paying him $50 in cash.
Yeah.
Frank Reich with the Panthers, no.
Nope.
Dennis Allen with the Saints, absolutely. Because based on their upcoming schedule and knowing they have Derek Carr and that division, they should, Chad, you said you could see 10 wins from them, right?
Yeah.
Yesterday?
Yeah. Based on the schedule, I think they're going to win that division.
They're 5-4 right now, and since Allen took over, they're 12-14 overall. Then he should win the division. And then there's Brian Daboll with the Giants, which, look, for what we saw last year, there's no way Brian Daboll should go, period. Although the Giants are one of those landing spots for Belichick, if you buy it.
I don't buy that. I mean, the guy they were one of the stories of the year
I agree,
last
man.
season. And
then this is maybe the most surprising. Mike McCarthy is just outside the top 10 right now. Three straight years.
That I buy.
3 straight years, or right now it's 2 straight with 12 wins in the regular season to lose, with a lot invested. And I always say this when we bring up his job security. Jerry Jones isn't getting younger.
No, and he desperate older owner that super competitive that wants another Super Bowl is not going to have any patience. And if he just decides
he's been patient,
this guy's never going to win the biggest of games, so we got to move on, it's going to happen quickly.
But he has won the Super Bowl as a head coach. Again, there's not many in the league right now who have, but he's one of them. I just think it's interesting halfway through the season where the perception is, because the perception, like with Bama earlier this year, vastly different now. And there will be 3 or 4 of these coaches whose team go on a run, and there will be a surprise firing too that isn't even listed here. But recently, Chad, we haven't seen a lot of shakeup. And the list of who you're going to hire isn't that deep. I think a lot of these guys it's a merry-go-round, which is unusual. Who else will we not see? Sean McVay. Although Samuel L. Jackson is tweeting this past weekend as the Rams fall to the Green Bay Packers. At what point do we start the Rams coaching conversation?
It's a great tweet.
It is.
1.7 million views. I guess it's a post now, not a tweet.
The post. But here's the only response I have to this is McVay chose to stay instead of taking the media deal and taking the path, by the way, of Sean Payton. As soon as we're going to get bad in New Orleans, peace for a year. McVay chose not to do that. And they're in the mix in a bad NFC, and they shouldn't be. A really bad defense, especially their secondary, that's played much better. And, I mean, Stafford's been banged up. I think the Rams have been better than I perceived them to be, because right now I figured they'd be where the Patriots are.
Well, he'll get every opportunity to lead the next quarterback for the Rams and the next iteration of what they are. But he's got an old quarterback problem right now. I mean, Matthew Stafford's still really good when healthy, but that's becoming fewer and farther between.
Carson Wentz isn't the savior?
That he's healthy. I don't think Carson Wentz is the one that's going to get them. They're not going to be saying F those picks in 3 years when Carson Wentz leads them to a Super Bowl win. I don't see that happening.
Yeah. Backups had their opportunity, and now it's Wentz behind Stafford.
Their next
which we're
possible
see
Super Bowl winning quarterback is playing somewhere in college right now. Let's go ahead and say that. He's not currently at Rams Central.
Coming up, the Iowa betting over-under hits a new record. Plus, we'll get weird with Davey Hudson. That's next on Hot Mic.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, It ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna lib. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human being. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
I made the call to end the Me Too movement. And today I'm going to continue making that case. And that's just a way to further taunt these women, to make them feel less than, to make them realize that this has just become a big joke. Deion Sanders is the Donald Trump of football.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing, and we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting. That was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only 1 or 2. That's rubbish, and we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. A bold taste of the Southern legend.
Just like that, the final hour is here for the Wednesday edition. Hot Mic with Hutton Withrow across the OutKick Network. 6th and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Coming up in 20 minutes, former NFL safety Tank Williams, now college football and NFL analyst. He'll be with us here on the program. Chad, how would you describe the show going into the final hour here, the final leg?
Getting through the middle of the week fast. That's what the show is doing for you.
Getting to the weekend, right? Your weekend begins on Thursday.
Yeah. Weekend starts tomorrow. Celebrate, everyone. This is Wednesday's the new Thursday. That's what I'm saying. It's time to get to the weekend.
Always a fast week with Withrow. We'll have his top 10 games of the college football weekend coming up tomorrow. Last year, this would be a no-brainer. Is Texas TCU among your top 10 consideration right now?
Oh yeah.
Is it because of the quarterback situation for Texas or more?
Oh no, it's more. They're just, they're under consideration. And I can't reveal everything about my top 10 list yet.
There's some good games this weekend.
As I'm going to look at it right now.
So
it's under consideration.
Yeah. Chad's doing the numbers right now, the calculations.
I would say there's a better than 50% chance that it is in the top 10.
Okay. Hear me out on this. While I'm not saying that they're hoping Texas has a chance to win the conference, it's not going to be Oklahoma. Is a perfect scenario for your Mark and company to have Oklahoma State beat the crap out of them for the Big 12 championship game?
Well, anybody.
Or anybody, but
anybody but Texas or Oklahoma.
Especially the vocal Mike Gundy and the we feel slighted crowd in Stillwater about Bedlam. He's been preaching this for 2 years now. It's going to be the end of Bedlam, and then he goes out on top there. And where they were to the start to now having a chance to play for the Big 12 title, I'm curious if just best scenario for them is probably Kansas State against Oklahoma State or something.
The best case scenario is anyone not named Texas or Oklahoma winning the Big 12.
But if you had your pick, you would want to beat one of them on the way out, wouldn't you? The way Oklahoma State handled Oklahoma, for instance.
Honestly, I think if they had their pick, they would not be in the Big 12 championship game, either one of them.
Sure.
It would be Oklahoma State versus Kansas State, two teams that are remaining in your conference in the Big 12 championship.
I still think Texas makes it.
Yeah, I do too.
And maybe
I think Texas is the best team in the Big 12.
Maybe that, and I fully admit I'm buying into the idea of Malik Murphy with where he's ranked, but also like the storyline that we mentioned yesterday, without Quinn Ewers, who's day to day, week to week. If he doesn't come back in a timely fashion now, the backup is Arch Manning. And the thought that we could see him at the end of the season, possibly, who knows, inserted into the Big 12 title game because of some injury that happens. I love that thought.
Yeah.
And what if it's Manning that wins for Texas on the way out in the final game?
Big 12 does not want Texas to win. That's
right.
For sure. I look at Oklahoma and now losers of 2 in a row. When Brent Venables had a very disappointing year 1 there, his seat's going to get extremely hot quick in the SEC. If they're not 9-3 in year 1 in the SEC, if they're anything below that, I think Oklahoma people, especially if they drop another one this year at some point, they're going to look around and think, is this the guy that's going to win in the SEC now that we're transitioning to this conference from the Big 12? I think it could get pretty crazy for him pretty quickly. Not now, not anything with this year, but early in his SEC tenure as they make that move.
Think about what Oklahoma and USC, what has happened to them versus what Lincoln Riley meant to Oklahoma. He was 55-10. He's now 18-5. He's already lost half as many games as he did in his tenure at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Brent Venables is 13-9. Chad, to your point. I mean, Caleb Williams there means
and it's not going to get any easier the next year for Oklahoma and Brent Venables. I am interested to see what it's still hard to wrap your head around Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC, but what success looks like for both programs. Texas just went to Tuscaloosa this year and won. So they're obviously thinking, we're going to go in there and compete for a SEC championship in year 1. Is Oklahoma feeling the same way? Are they going to get really impatient with Brent Venables quickly if they're not close to the top of that conference immediately? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what their expectation level is when they get to the SEC. Are they trying to think about a transition period where maybe expectations aren't as high as they're going to be later on, or is it go there and win right away?
So
I'm trying to see their schedule next year, who they're playing. I know they host Tennessee. Josh Heupel's homecoming to the school he played for.
One more hypothetical.
I'm looking at who they're playing in year 1 in the SEC. Oklahoma's 2024 schedule. Losers of 2 straight right now in the Big 12. In the SEC, they're going to play Texas, at Auburn, at LSU, at Missouri, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee at home, and at Ole Miss in year 1. Not easy.
Just ask Bama.
Not easy
many,
at all.
Not many are going to go through that gauntlet and do what Alabama's done this year, right? I mean,
yeah. Well,
I say across the country, by the way, not just any SEC school.
No divisions next year, so all that's going away.
Right.
So it's going to be kind of a year-to-year thing. But in year one, that's a tough schedule.
Let me throw out a name that we're not mentioning enough on the flip side of the discussion for how other programs could view their coach. We have said for months now, if you want Jimbo Fisher out in College Station, who are you going to get with a better resume, right? Which is what they had when they hired him from Florida State. Where would he end up?
Jimbo Fisher?
Yeah. I mean, it's realistic to think he's right back in the SEC. He's just the next team. Like you mentioned Venables and what happens. Like he takes his buyout, right? And maybe he sits out a year, maybe he doesn't. But there are going to be some SEC openings soon.
Here's a hypothetical
you've
for
got
you.
2 to 3 years and you eat your own.
Well, I think the hottest seat right now in the SEC is Sam Pittman at Arkansas. Would Arkansas hire Jimbo Fisher immediately if Texas A&M fired him?
What is it going to
bargain basement Jimbo Fisher making less than he was at A&M? Would you take that?
Making way. What about way less if there's offset language, like Butch Jones getting the buyout from Tennessee to be an analyst at Bama? You see what I'm saying?
Well, I don't know. I don't know who would hire him as offensive coordinator right now, considering their offensive struggles.
I'm saying
at A&M.
Head coach.
Yeah, I'm saying Arkansas is the head coach, not an analyst situation. But
what about Florida? Again, like there are plenty
he won a
of
national title at Florida State.
Plenty of hypotheticals there.
I don't think Florida's going to do anything this year, though.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be this year. Like if they bring him back for next year, that's a college football playoff
season. Who could
season.
A&M hire with a better resume than Jimbo Fisher? One guy, Urban Meyer. That's who you can hire with a better resume in college football.
Which is crazy to think about in terms of
There you
what
go.
guys are getting
There's
paid.
your hire.
What we're seeing from the resumes of coaches getting paid versus the criticism of what Jimbo Fisher's doing with his money, right? We're not thinking about the next step for him. It's always about, is Texas A&M going to fire him or not?
Yeah, I did an interview with our guy, David Nuno, with Texags Radio yesterday. They've turned. They've definitely turned in College Station. I mean, he's saying there's no excuse. Because people are going to point to, Connor Wegman went down, and they would have been better. He said, I'm not buying it. There was no excuse made. He said, this is unacceptable. What's happened this year? Now, he said, I didn't think we were going to go 10-2, talking about A&M. But I also didn't see this happening again, where you're losing all of these close games one after the other. And he said the biggest issue is it's something different every week. And I can buy that because in October, September and into early October, the one thing you could say about A&M positive was their front seven is elite. They stop the run. They get after the quarterback. They got a really good defensive front seven. And then Ole Miss gashes them on the ground. Then they have problems stopping the run. It's every week.
Yeah.
It's something different. The offense can't get it going. Too many mistakes, too many turnovers. Then the special teams lets them down. It's always something with A&M, and that's been the story for Jimbo Fisher the last 2.5 years.
Chad, Jake Dickert, head coach at Washington State, says that teams like his are not going to compete in the NIL world, that the competition is too steep given the just the landscape of the money, transfer portal, and name, image, likeness, even from the high school ranks in recruiting. This is the same Coach Dickert that beat Oregon State and then said, how dare you say this was the No One Watches Bowl? When they were relevant back in, late September, they were playing well. And now it's, we can't compete at the highest level in the NIL space moving forward. Now that they're not on the landscape of discussion for the Pac-12.
Well, he is in the landscape of discussion for Michigan State's head coaching job. It was listed that him and Lance Leipold are the two leading candidates for that job.
And I think he's a great option there.
Yeah, and I think he'll have NIL money at Michigan State if he goes there. So he's kind of planting the seeds for that. I think some of this is a little bit of excuse-making.
Yeah.
For this reason. Washington State is never going to compete at the top levels of college football for recruits, period. I don't have the recruiting rankings in front of me, but I'm willing to bet Washington State is pretty regularly outside the top 35 in national recruiting rankings or top 40. So there's never been an era where you're going to go and pluck players away from USC within your own or Oregon right now or whoever that team may be. If Alabama and Washington State's going after the same player, I'm willing to bet they probably are going to go to Tuscaloosa and play for Nick Saban, whether there's NIL money in there or not. So
they're not in the top 50.
I think that's just a new excuse. Like, if you're the head coach at Washington State, you've always had to win with some cunning. I mean, look at what Mike Leach was able to do there. Look at what Jake Dickert's been able to do there. There's some cloak and dagger going on in any program like that. Matt Campbell at Iowa State. I don't look at Iowa State and think, that's a program where you can go and get the top-level recruits out of the Midwest and out of that. No. You're going to have to win with guys who are overlooked. You're going to have to win with scheme. You're going to have to win with guys who are bought into whatever it is you're doing. You know that when you take the job. So you saying publicly that I just can't compete in this NIL world. We're just never going to have that here at Washington State. To me, you're planting built-in excuses that have always been at Washington State. The new name of that excuse is just NIL. Those excuses have always been there. You're in the Palouse. You're in Pullman, Washington. You're not in Los Angeles. You're not in the Deep South surrounded by players. You're not in Texas. So those excuses have always existed at Washington State.
Yeah. Higher or lower?
You don't have to say them is my point.
Exactly. Class of 2024, higher or lower in the recruiting rankings than Washington State?
Well, this is a good game.
Iowa State.
I'm going to say higher.
One spot higher.
Okay, good.
Okay, so just for reference, Washington State right now, 24/7, they're 56th in the country.
Yeah, not
Class,
good.
They're 56.
That's not good.
Washington, by the way, is right around 50, I believe. Or 40. Sorry, 40 for
Washington.
Washington.
Should be higher, but yeah.
Higher or lower, Wake Forest?
I'm going to say Wake Forest is lower.
Higher. Considerably higher on this. Wake Forest is, well, I say considerably. Wake Forest is 48.
Dave Clawson getting it done. Didn't know he's such a recruiter.
They're within a long toss distance, but that's a big separation.
Maybe they got a great NIL program there at Wake Forest.
East Carolina.
East Carolina lower. The Pirates.
2 spots lower.
East Carolina is awful this year, too. I want to say, I think they have the same record as UConn. I think they're 1-8. Kansas, historically, way lower than Washington State. I'm going to say higher right now.
All of these were within 5 spots of each other, roughly.
I'm going to say higher.
5 spots higher. Yes. And last one, I will go with, there's a good one here. Indiana and Syracuse.
Oh,
higher or lower?
So Dino Babers is probably on his way out at Syracuse. Tough to recruit when everybody knows your coach is going to get fired for the next year.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say Syracuse lower. I'm going to say Indiana a little bit more certainty with Tom Allen as their head coach. I'm going to go Indiana higher.
Both are higher. So both average a 184 score on the composite rankings. Washington State, just for comparisons, at 178. This goes to your point.
Yeah.
Like,
is our guy Keith Bullock chipping in some NIL money? How is Syracuse getting it done recruiting-wise?
I think he would have, but, Keith's just a realist. I mean, if he knows his coach is out, he needs to see who the new coach is going to be, right?
Open up some coffee shops up in the Syracuse area. Get some recruits in.
It is crazy, though,
it's
to see
really
some of these
tough
other
to
programs.
recruit to Washington State.
Iowa is 32nd.
Anyone who's followed college sports at all knows it's tough there. It was tough before NIL.
Hey.
It's tough after NIL.
Jack.
It hasn't made it any more difficult.
Just the perception here, Vanderbilt is 38th. Washington State is 56th, sorry.
Vanderbilt, typically, I think this is kind of an SEC thing, the sort of the rising tides, raising all the boats. They're usually around like 30 to 40 in the rankings, which is higher than most other Power 5 teams. It just, when you're between 30 and 40 in the SEC, you're getting your quite literal doors blown off.
But you're going to a program where the relevance is week 0.
Yeah.
People are watching because college football has returned.
Yeah, that Hawaii game, that was the high point for this season so far.
At least Jake Dickert is taking on College Game Day, right?
Yeah. And
the No One Watches Bowl.
Yeah, I mean,
beating the team, by the way, in Oregon State that is in the same boat as Washington State in our discussion right now.
Well, I saw something where Clark Lee is saying, I'm going to embrace transfer portal now in NIL. And I'm thinking, did you not embrace NIL before? I just thought no one kicked in for NIL at Vandy. I didn't think it was about the coach not embracing it as much as you got to set up an NIL system if you're going to make it happen. And do enough people care at Vanderbilt to pitch it. They've got the money.
They do.
But do enough people with the money that are Vanderbilt grads or connected to the university, do they care enough to set up a viable NIL program?
Now think about how you feel if you're Washington State and what to your point, what Dickert's saying about the competitive nature of where he currently is and where the program is, based on the model
State
that's allowed.
Needs like an Elon Musk to be a graduate of that university just to completely foot the bill for every program on campus.
Or a Deion Sanders. However, Colorado's lower than Washington State.
Yeah, Colorado's terrible in recruiting right now because I think they're saving everything for the transfer portal.
Yeah. They've already got their class.
I think this entire roster is leaving except for Shedeur Sanders. I really do. None of them are good enough.
Tank Williams joins us next. NFL and college football discussion with the former NFL safety.
Quote, a good state champion caliber high school boys team would smoke the best team in the WNBA. Then this weekend, after the video was posted and the critics, of course, came for him, he doubled down on what he said, posting this on X. Quote, it's sexist to say women's basketball players aren't as good as men's. That was a question, obviously. It's my opinion, and I'm putting $1 million behind it. If I'm wrong, the WNBA team can take my money and make more from one game than they do for the entire season. Okay, so let's get into this because obviously there's a lot of people out there who are just assuming that Clay is being sexist, that he is trying to really punk the WNBA because let's be honest, the ratings for the WNBA aren't great, which is exactly why Clay made the joke at the end of that. If you were to give them $1 million for losing the bet, that would be more than the WNBA would make regularly for one game under normal circumstances. But the fact remains that men and women biologically super different, and that's what he's talking about. We even look at a boys' high school basketball team and the makeup of their players, what they're able to do, their size, their skills, and look at the WNBA players who are oftentimes much older. They're professional basketball players, but still, the level of competition would not at all be on the same playing field. So, Chris, let's get into that. What is your take on this? The fact that people would say that, Clay, you're being sexist, when reality remains men and women, super different, even at very different ages, different places in their careers, there would be no matchup whatsoever.
I don't even think it's questionable. I love that Clay took it to him. I think a lot of times silence speaks louder than words. The Las Vegas Aces haven't said anything in response yet. Mm-hmm. So, look, you're right. I dug into the rosters, the Las Vegas Aces, and then, look, I've spent some time training at IMG Academy. I work with athletes at a school called Lou High, which is one of the top programs in the country. And we have guards 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". We're on the Aces. The tallest players are 6'3" and 6'4", and those are their bigs. So they don't even have anybody to really account for the bigs on the male teams. And I don't know that it's how in any way is this a sexist thing to say. Yeah.
Well, I have a woman, I think, who will be able to help answer this question. She is super smart. She's super intelligent. I am a big fan of her. Everybody, you're also a big fan of her. We all are. It just has to be said. So let's go ahead and bring in the woman of the hour, Riley Gaines. Hello, Riley. I'm happy to see you again. I feel like I get to spend so much time with you these days.
I know, right? Very good to see you, and I will say it is rainy here as well, which just sucks.
Okay, so are you, I know the last time we talked, you were like bouncing all over the place. Where are you right now?
I'm actually in Nashville, but headed to New York today. So I'll be on deck.
Okay, well, welcome. You get to go from rain to rain.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, Riley, let's get into the topic that we were just discussing. Obviously, Clay, being a little bit sarcastic in the way that he framed the question, but he's saying he's willing to make a bet that the WNBA champions, still being the champions, professional basketball players, would not be able to hold a candle to any high school boys basketball team in the country. Is he being sexist, or is he just speaking facts that men and women are very different in terms of what they are capable of athletically?
Boom. Right there. It's not sexist to say men and women are different. Like you said, it's reality, it's truth, it's common sense, it's logic, it's reasoning. We all know it.
6th and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Glad you're with us. Hot Mic with Hunt and Withrow rolls on across the OutKick network, and we continue with Tank Williams. Always great to have you on, Tank, former NFL safety, and now a sports betting analyst, college football, NFL analyst. He's got you covered. Tank, good to see you, man.
Yeah, good to see y'all. How's it going?
Great. No shortage of topics right now in the heart of football season, and
Not at all.
On and off the field. Where do you stand on the Michigan sign stealing allegations and penalties that could be headed their way as we await what Tony Petitti and the Big Ten will be deciding sooner rather than later, maybe as early as tomorrow? As a former player at the highest level, how does this take place behind the scenes? And is everyone doing it, or is this above and beyond what would be expected?
I wouldn't say everyone is doing it when you have guys that are basically in disguise on other people's sidelines and trying to, I guess, allegedly record tape signs and all that stuff so you can get a competitive advantage.
You didn't have a Marine at Stanford that was in charge of the director of intelligence, you're saying, that was out there practicing espionage at other campuses?
Stanford wouldn't allow that on our payroll, unfortunately. That's why we only made it to the Rose Bowl about once every 30 years before I got there. But yeah, man, it's just unbelievable the lengths that teams will go to try to be successful. Like, I understand trying to get a leg up, doing your traditional scouting where you're looking at film and things like that. And there are some cases where coaches are able to pick up on signs during a game.
Right.
But not going out scouting the signs so you can get a competitive advantage that way. So I feel that if there's proof that that's exactly what was taking place, then they need to be punished and just deal with the consequences, because obviously, that's just a competitive advantage that a lot of teams don't go through those lengths to try to take advantage of.
I mean, and it still goes on now, but I mean, the obvious ways that you defensively or even offensively, based on what quarterbacks could pick up on, the tells of the quarterback, right? You could get a read on what the play was going to run or pass. And that would be something in advanced scouting that's totally fine from the NFL model, but that's really what you're trying to pick up on more than just a sign from the sideline, because, again, the communication in the helmets has changed a lot in the NFL, and we're not seeing it right now in college, but we probably will moving forward.
I think we'll definitely see the communication in the helmet. I'm not sure exactly why it's taking so long, but now there's always this thing that needs to be a catalyst in order for significant change to occur. And I believe this will be the catalyst for college football to get the communication between the coaches and the players on the field, and then we won't have to worry about these issues. There'll just be another way that teams try to find an advantage and a leg up on their opponent.
All right, so sports betting analyst here, Tank, but I'm also going to try to tie into your experience as a veteran in the NFL. Inside locker rooms right now, how many locker rooms truly believe that they're contenders currently? And I view this through the lens of maybe a futures bet on playoff scenario who can make it to a NFC or AFC championship game. And I think it boils down to, and correct me if I'm wrong, how many locker rooms truly trust the quarterback in a big pressure-packed moment? Because there's not many that are very consistent currently.
True. And I would say for that reason that there's probably more teams than you would think that believe that they have a chance, because you understand that all you have to do is get there. And if something just clicks with your team and you ride that wave, I mean, how many people had trust in Eli Manning before they made it to the playoffs,
right,
and then ultimately won the Super Bowl? You know what I'm saying? He got hot at the right time, had some playmakers around him, and then the rest is history. And so I believe when you look at it, you can go down all along the AFC East. I mean, minus the Jets and the Patriots. But, look, the Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills can make it. The entire AFC North has a legitimate shot to make the playoffs and then actually get on a hot streak and surge. When I look at the AFC South, the Jags, Texans, they're in the mix. And look at a team like the Titans, man, like my former team. You have Will Levis at quarterback, and if he's able to kind of catch flame like the way C.J. Stroud is doing in Houston, I mean, you never know. So, I mean, there's so many different teams and scenarios that you can talk about throughout the AFC South and NFC. So I think for that reason alone, you want to have a trusted and proven quarterback that you can lean on during those tough times. But we also see the importance of having a coach that guys buy into and believe in. I mean, the perfect example is seeing what happened in Las Vegas with Josh McDaniels, man. I mean, they have talent all up and down that roster. But when you have that disconnect between the head coach and the players, you can't win games. And then you have Antonio Pearson there, who's a guy who played the game resonates with the players, got them energized, got them refocused, and then they can just go out there and open up a can. And so that's what you expect. When you have guys like Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, some of these young coaches who can relate with their players, devise great schemes to put them in the best opportunity to succeed, then that's when you get to see these good results between those white lines.
Why have we seen a disconnect with Bill Belichick in New England with that team?
I mean, it's easy to have Bill's approach when you're winning games. I mean, he has like this dry personality that, we thought was, funny. I was up there for a cup of coffee,
right.
So I got a sense of what it was like in that Patriots locker room. But I mean, he can coach you hard and do all those things as long as you're winning games. But I wouldn't say that there was this deep connection that he had with a lot of the players. Maybe like some of the guys who have been there for a long time, like a Brady and some of those guys, and rightfully so, that put a lot of rings on your fingers. But even Brady and Belichick had their moments where he'll kind of chew them out in meetings, and you'll say, like, I understand you want to coach everybody the same, but even when I was in Tennessee, and I felt like Fish would give some players, undue privileges when they didn't deserve it versus others. But at the same time, when you have a guy like Tom Brady, who's arguably the best player that's played the game, and let alone one of the best quarterbacks that ever played the game, man, you can go ahead and throw him a bone in meeting. So I think when you look at it from that sense, and now you're not winning games, and you have a locker room where you're not having fun, and you can't do the things you want to do on social media and everything else, that can rub thin pretty quick. And I think we're starting to see that in New England.
Tek, I'm going to ask you a little bit about college football, but before I get there, comparison between college and the NFL. You obviously having played in both. In college, the coach dictates everything, right? The program is driven by the coach. We all know that. But how often in the NFL is the team's attitude, whether positive or negative, about how things are going or how a game can go, how often is it reflected more by the quarterback than the head coach of an NFL team?
It really depends. Like, obviously, if you have a really great quarterback and he's the leader of your team, then as your quarterback goes, the team goes. We've seen that with guys like Tom Brady. You see it with this younger generation of Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and the like. When they have that confidence, they exude that confidence in their team. They do nothing but they follow. But at the same time, we've also seen teams where you have like a Ray Lewis, where you have Trent Dilfer at quarterback, and he wasn't the leader of that team. I mean, he was just a piece of the puzzle. But Ray Lewis and those guys on defense really, paved the way for those Ravens teams to, make it to the playoffs on a consistent basis and ultimately win a ring. And so it varies. It just depends on each individual situation. But I will say that no matter what, you have to have a great coach that has the ear of the team. Like, there are times when, really good teams have to have like these players only meetings and then right the ship, because it depends on the players. Like, you hear all the good coaches, whether it's in football or in basketball, hearing Greg Popovich, like, the players win the game. So ultimately it comes down to the players making sure that everyone's aligned, just doing their job and going out there and execute on the high level. But you have to have that connectivity between the head coach and the players in order for everyone to be on the same page and have some success. And a lot of times when you see that disconnectivity, that's when you have the issues that we saw going on in Vegas and some of these other areas, Denver Broncos and the like.
We haven't had you on since your alma mater's big comeback win over Colorado with Stanford, down 29 points at one point, 29-0 in that game. Come all the way back and win that one. Huge win for Stanford and Troy Taylor in year one. On the flip side now for Deion Sanders, it's been a lot of bad since the fast start to the year for Colorado. What do you think about his approach and his ability now moving forward to take the negative and turn it into something positive, whether it be in the last few games of this year to try to get them bowl eligible or this offseason moving into next year?
Honestly, I believe his approach was effective. When you look at Colorado, not a lot of people expected them to win more than like 2 games this season. And so for them to start off the way they did, go into TCU, get that upset, and then just ride the wave, and then ending up parlaying that into whenever they have a game coming up on a Saturday, Friday, or whatever it is, they're nationally televised because they're must-see TV right now, because people want to see what happens, whether it's having The Rock at the games and all these other different celebrities, to them playing well, to them getting their head beat in. They're just must-see TV right now. And when you have that when you capture the nation, capture the world in that way, then obviously it's going to pay dividends. You see what they're doing with the blender glasses and everything else. So I think what Deion has done It's been good for college football. You notice that the ESPNs, the Foxes, and the CBSs, and everyone else was trying to get a piece of prime when everything was going right for them. And I believe that kids noticed that as well. And you understand that you can make it to the league. I mean, I went to the league playing for Stanford, and we only played in one Rose Bowl. And a lot of times we went 3 and 8 and 5 and 6. So you have a really great coach who's going to have some good coaches around you, teach you the fundamentals and everything you need to do in order to make it to the next level and succeed. And at the same time, you're going to have eyes on you all the time because people want to see what Prime and that Colorado team is doing now. So I think from that standpoint, he's only going to continue to recruit better and get guys through the portal. And if he did this much in 1 year, just imagine what he's going to do with all the lights that were shining him throughout this season, being able to recruit in the offseason, solidify those offensive defensive line, and then come back with talent that he has at the skill positions. There'll be something to reckon with next year.
Tank Williams, our guest, sports betting analyst, former NFL safety, and college football and NFL analyst as well. At what points total on an over-under, how low does the points total have to be for you to bet the Iowa matchup and the over? Because it's setting a new low. We've set a new record for an opening over-under at 28.5 for this upcoming matchup against Rutgers. And they've already set the record twice this season.
Yeah.
And they've hit the under in both of these, Tank. Would you take the under? 28.5 total points against Iowa and Rutgers.
Yo, it's so funny because I have a former associate with Yahoo Fantasy, Andy Behrens, and he's an Iowa grad. And we have fun just talking about the Iowa unders because they always hit.
I know.
Like, I can't believe Ferentz put in his contract that he needed to score that many points, like 24 points a game, knowing damn well they weren't going to be able to do it. They haven't done it since he's been there. And so then he had to go ahead and peace out of the season early. So when I put faith in betting the over on Iowa, regardless of who they playing, hell no. But if I want to be safe, I'll go ahead and SGP it. And if you have confidence that they're going to win the game, I'll go ahead and put them on money line, and then I'll bring that total up and then smash the under a little bit just to provide myself a little bit of cover.
7-2, Chad.
Doesn't it warm your heart, though, as a defensive guy like yourself, Tank, that this team has 2 losses and may be playing for a Big Ten championship, and they literally cannot score. They cannot. They have no offense, and their defense carries the way. That's got to make you feel good as a defensive guy.
Yeah, now it's not a surprise why, the Big Ten went out there and they got a SC and a UCLA and a Oregon and a Washington, because they talk about the way we play defense in the Pac-12, but at least we put points on the board. At least our damn games are entertaining. So even though I hate to see the Pac-12 breaking up, at least y'all going to finally get some damn scoring in the Big Ten. So you're welcome.
Is there a game you have your eye on in particular when the lines open this weekend in college?
Man, honestly, I'll get to college here shortly. I've been focusing more so on the NFL right now. Like, one thing that I kind of peaked was the Green Bay-Pittsburgh game, because I have zero confidence in Green Bay's offense whatsoever. There's no love in my heart for Jordan Love and what they're doing in Green Bay. So when I look at it, where the total, I believe, was at 37.5, 38 or something like that,
that's right.
It's kind of similar. It's similar to what I was talking about for the Iowa game, where I have confidence that Pittsburgh's going to win. I wish that Minkah Fitzpatrick would be back for this game. I'm not sure he will be, but they got Cam Heyward back. They got those 2 guys on the edge, specifically T.J. Watt and Highsmith. And so go ahead and take Pittsburgh money line. Take the total up to like 42.5, and then you smash the under on that one too. And I think you'll be in a pretty safe spot, because I have confidence that Pittsburgh's going to win that game, and that Jordan Love and that Green Bay offense isn't going to do anything against the Steelers.
In 10 days between games for Pittsburgh, I believe the line's at 3 last I checked, and Pittsburgh's hosting this. The other thing too, like, the unders have been hitting often in the NFL as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a safe play. It's a weird deal where the rules are set up against the defense, but yet we've seen really low-scoring games for the most part.
Yes, and I really don't know how to explain it either, because I've been talking about it for so long that the NFL has just been trying to turn it into flag football, and that continues to be the case.
Yes.
When you see the penalties that you get against the quarterbacks and things like that. But that being said, I really don't understand why it's been so difficult for some of these teams to score. Maybe it's the contracts. Because when you start to look at some of the roster construction right now, where you had a Patrick Mahomes back in the day that had a Travis Kelce and a Tyreek Hill and things like that. Like, those days are gone. We have to pay Patrick Mahomes all that money. Once you do that, then you can't have all those weapons on the outside. So he still has Kelsey, but who else can he go to that's going to be dependable on the offense? Like, obviously, Rashee Rice has started to kind of make a name for himself right now, but that's not like having Tyreek on the opposite side. So there's rare occasions where you can still have teams like, say, for example, where Tua's still on his rookie deal, where you can have a Tyreek, you have a Jalen Waddle, and all these other guys.
Load
I
up.
think when you have, so I think when you have a roster formation like that, it allows you to have those explosive moments and those explosive days like we've seen from Miami and some of these other offenses where it could be a little bit tough from the ones that we've been so accustomed to seeing.
At Tank Williams 13 is where you can follow Tank on social. Sports betting analyst, always great with us. Tank, great to have you back on, man. We appreciate the time today.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Anytime.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thanks, Tank.
Chad, well done on the remembering the comeback by Stanford.
Yeah, big-time comeback. Anything that makes Tank happy, I try to remember every time he comes on.
That's right. Weird news next, plus the latest headlines, including, are we going to hear what Michigan responded with?
Dabo Swinney ripping his own fans. Dabo Swinney at Clemson is, I don't know, they tell me that he's the guy that doesn't like the transfer portal because he's made some comments that weren't exactly supportive of it. Dabo Swinney has done a job at Clemson that very few thought could be done. Clemson is a town about this big. Well, I better do this, not that, because that's like a white power sign idiots say. But it's about that big. The state is South Carolina. The state is not Clemson. So, but Dabo Swinney put Clemson in rarefied air. If you, a couple years ago, were going to name me the 3 best college football teams before Georgia's run here, you'd say Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. That's kind of who it always came down to. It felt like. So Dabo Swinney is now the victim of something that is good in one way, but it's bad in another. Incredible expectations of your fan base, meaning 10-2 ain't good enough. It just ain't. You can say whatever you want, but it just ain't. We got to be better. What? We're not in the college football playoff? What? We're not winning a national champion? What? We're 4-2? That's only winning 67% of our games? Here's what Dabo had to say. If you don't go undefeated, people say you're losers, that you're terrible. Let me tell you something. This is why football coaches for years and years and years and years fought the college football playoff. We're at a point in time, and I hate that, where people, if you don't go undefeated, you're losers. You're terrible. It's just a terrible mindset. Honestly, maybe we need to lose a few games and lighten up the bandwagon. Sometimes the bandwagon can get a little full. That's the one good thing about going through a little bit of so-called adversity, is that you really find out who's with you and who's not. That's all crap. Let me explain to you Dabo Swinney's day, can I? Dabo Swinney probably wakes up around 5:30. Dabo Swinney smokes shit, shower, shave, shampoo, goes to the office. Probably has a meeting at 7. Dabo Swinney then is probably in different meetings with players or recruits, or maybe the administration, and maybe watching film, whatever. Then he has practice. Then after practice, he's doing the same thing. Then in the evening, he's making phone calls. Probably goes home around 10. At no point in time in his day, his week, his month, his year, is he finding out who's with us and who's not with us. It's not like there's a list. Now, maybe you find out what media member wants to rip you, but on a daily basis, a monthly basis, you're not finding out any of this crap. It's very simple. Coaches, if you want to know who's with you, understand that when you lose, nobody's really with you. If you want to know who's really with you, win. And then everybody's really with you. It's literally that simple. As my father used to say to me, Dan, we're with you, win or tie, and we ain't so sure about the tie. So shut up with that stuff, win some football games, and don't sweat it. Seriously, do yourself a favor. Work hard, grab yourself a glass of wine, go sit in your chair, and read a book instead of being on social media or worrying about who is with you and who is not with you.
Chad, live sports continues to dominate in ratings, specifically football. But, I mean, even the NBA is going to try to ride out some in-season tournament ratings. Chiefs-Dolphins in Germany, NFL Network's most-watched international game. Marquee matchup, two solid teams, low-scoring affair, 21-14, and you had Miami, who had to score 14 in the second half to make it watchable in the second half. But viewership up 66% over the Munich game in 2022. And by the way, it averaged nearly 10 million.
Well, 27 million people watched Cowboys-Eagles Sunday.
Yep.
Most watched game of the year. 8.8 million on average watched Alabama-LSU Saturday night. That's the most watched Alabama-LSU game since 2019. That, of course, was the national championship Joe Burrow season with Ed O as the head coach. That game also in Tuscaloosa. So, yeah, live sports viewing way up. I think the state of entertainment as a whole right now with television shows on streamers or anywhere else, well, way down.
But this is 8:30 in the morning.
Stock way down on everything else right now.
8:30 local, 9:30 Eastern. On Sunday morning, or you're tuned in to watch this. And the other factor is the NFL is playing this perfectly because this was NFL Network where people know to go find this game. You know, NCAA tournament, Chad. True TV. How do we find that channel?
Yeah.
I don't hear any of that when it comes to NFL Network.
There's a lot of stuff moving to Peacock, too. Even college basketball is going to have Peacock's going to have a lot of college basketball this year.
Max with HBO, they're having a lot of Turner products on.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Both hockey and NBA. NBA first initial numbers from their in-season tournament ratings, they averaged like 1.7 million was their viewership.
Is that good?
It's good compared to what they get for a regular season game this time of year. And they're going to use that because they're going into negotiations for the new television contract.
Who's winning that in-season tournament right now? Where are we in the bracket?
No
Do you know?
No idea. I still can't tell you how it works.
Davey, why did you not have a competition where we could fill out an in-season tournament bracket the way we do a March Madness bracket? I think we should be the one show that actually fills out a bracket and has a big competition.
It may be just impossible to fill out a bracket for this. Only because
I knew someone who would do a women's NIT bracket as kind of a joke. And they would actually put money on it every year, and they'd research the teams.
If it were possible to fill out a bracket, wouldn't the NBA produce said bracket?
I bet I could find a bracket somewhere, right? Or is it?
I don't know,
man.
man.
It's group play, so at first, it's like there's the round robin aspect.
Is there a bracket
to it?
challenge for the World Cup in group play?
So they're basically just like, we're going to play games, and then we're just going to arbitrarily decide who plays next based on what's going to get the best television ratings.
It's way too complicated.
So there is no bracket. It's just play, and if you win, we'll decide who plays next. I'm going to look it up right now. NBA in-season tournament bracket. And see if they have one.
What is it? It's just 4 teams make the tournament in Vegas.
Printable bracket. Printable bracket. Let's put that in the old Google machine.
You're about to kill a tree.
And see what pops up.
All the possible brackets.
Oh, here it is. NBA.com 2023 in-season tournament bracket.
Third cousin, once removed, is a part of this bracket.
Let's look at where we are now.
23andMe file to find out the bracket for the NBA in-season tournament.
Hutton, I went to, maybe the internet is slow. I don't think so, though.
No, it's just trying to download what the bracket would look like.
They don't actually have it. On the NBA's website, you click on it, but there's nothing there once you get there.
It's impossible. They don't want you to.
You know what's on the NBA? I wish I could
tune in to find out.
I wish I could just show my screen right now. That could be a real problem at some point. But just show my screen to everyone else. It's got a ribbon banner ad of the in-season tournament, begins November 3rd, it says. Then a New Balance ad underneath it, and that's it. That when you click on bracket.
Well done.
They want it to be a mystery.
Yeah. These games count, though, except for the championship game, which does not count for the overall record of the team.
Really?
The one game that doesn't count.
What
on
happens
the
to the
record.
champion?
You get $500,000 cash, each player and coach.
It seems like they've just decided to take water and bottle it and sell it.
Yeah, but see, but they're
It's
getting
the same thing that we.
What if you gave them an
1.7
automatic?
is better than 700,000, which would be mocked right now, right? Like, and again, like the viewership numbers for a weeknight on ESPN for NBA is not anything that making headlines like we would be discussing normally.
What if you gave them a bye in the playoffs
Or TNT.
The winner of the in-season tournament? Let's really up the stakes.
Yeah, I
Like
think
just some awful team goes all in on that and then just shuts it down the rest of the season.
The problem
because
is
they're in the second round already.
Chad, you've nailed it. The problem is we're discussing what ifs while the tournament's going on, and there shouldn't be any more what ifs. We should know. We can't even find a bracket.
My knowledge of the NBA in-season tournament are the ESPN promos when I'm watching MACtion on Tuesday night. I'm watching MAC football games. I'm not watching the NBA in-season tournament. And my extensive knowledge of this whole tournament simply comes from commercial breaks when they show a promo of, I think it was Phoenix and LA. It was the one I saw was playing in the in-season tournament. It was Lakers Suns, which I'm like, oh, that's a good matchup. But where do they go if they win?
Yeah,
no one knows.
It's not spectacular, but it's off to it's the opening of the tournament, and if they can build on it, because again, like you've got to continue to push this so you have people discussing it, and it doesn't have the regular season feel to it. In-season tournament, Chad, Knicks Bucks averaged 1.6 million, and the late game, Dallas Denver averaged 1.79, so
That's
just
not
1.8. And again, this is about moving forward with negotiations because they've got the 10-year agreement with the CBA. They're locked in. They can guarantee programming. What is that worth? Well, they're coming up with ways to boost the numbers and try to get the buy-in from the players and the fans. I can't buy in, though, if I can't print a bracket, to your point. It's an in-season tournament. There should be a printable option to this. And have you're right, have the bracket challenge.
You know, there's a whole, they call it NBA Twitter. I guess now it's NBA X. It's a whole subsection of people that follow the league and that are all into it all the time.
Yeah.
You probably go to those spaces of the internet to watch shows that are really dialed into the NBA. You come to our show where we can speculate about who's actually still playing in the in-season tournament.
Yeah.
We used to have a real or fake high school football game of the week on the
that's
show.
right.
Well, I mean, we could have a real or fake
We could make our own
NBA
bracket.
in-season tournament.
There we go.
Box score, things that happen in the game. Davey could read it, and we may not even know if it's real or not.
It would be weird if the next Woj bomb was him producing the link that worked to actually access a bracket, right?
That'd be the Woj bomb to end all Woj bombs.
Actually, here is the link. Here's breaking news. The link that works so you can view said tournament bracket.
Here is the
right
bracket.
now is just an ad for New Balance.
Crazy.
Yeah. Crazy headlines as well.
Speaking of weird.
Yeah, let's get where Davey.
How about that segue?
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Talking now.
Gentlemen, my first story for today isn't so much weird. It's more of a complaint, but it ties into a weird story.
Okay.
So, are you guys by chance fans of The Simpsons? Is that ever your all's forte?
I am familiar with a lot of the comedy of The Simpsons. I like the comedy family tree that spawned The Simpsons and where it all went. But I don't think I've ever watched a full episode.
I'm very strange in this regard. Simpsons would be third on my viewership compared to South Park's number one.
Yeah.
Family Guy, Simpsons. In
That's
terms
right.
of just if it's on. And I kind of get annoyed with it if it's just randomly playing after an NFL game or something. Because it's on everywhere.
Here's my cartoon hierarchy.
Go ahead.
Beavis and Butthead.
Okay, yeah.
And then nothing else. I stopped watching cartoons after Beavis and Butthead when I was in 7th grade. That's it. But I do love South Park clips. Hutton shows me South Park clips, and I laugh out loud every time.
I think you should try to get back into some of these shows. There's some good ones out there. South Park, I mean, all those episodes you can watch on Max. But the reason I bring up the story of The Simpsons, which by the way, I guess is like the first adult cartoon that's kind of spawned all of these other
massive hit
great franchises. But one of the longest gags that they've had on the show is Homer strangling Bart. And the first episode, I think, goes back to 1989, where Bart would always get strangled and Homer would just say, "You little," and then kind of go on. But apparently they've decided to stop doing this. And they've just and people are upset because it's like, oh, you can't have fun now, you can't do anything. And like one of the episodes was one of Homer's neighbors complimented his handshake and for a very firm grasp, and Homer just said to Marge, see, Marge, strangling the boy paid off. And he goes, nah, I'm just kidding. I don't do that anymore. Times have changed. I'm a little frustrated that they're getting rid of that. It was always.
How do people not understand this is comedy? Like, this is not real.
Well,
it's a cartoon.
Well, no, people understand it. Again, South Park does it.
And they get away with it.
Well, because they don't cancel themselves.
They don't kowtow
Far
to
too
people.
many networks, businesses, shows, long-running are canceling themselves.
Yeah. It's an epidemic.
It's
self-cancellation.
It's dumb, and it's, I mean, I don't know if you would just take go with Trey and Matt from South Park in their line of thinking, and if you do it long enough, everyone's just like, oh, South Park does it. But the Simpsons can't?
Well, I think
Homer Simpson can?
They've always been one to kind of kowtow, so they pretty much just went ahead and decided, no, we're just not going to do it, which for as much as they've been able to get away with over the years, I don't like, again, like I don't know who they're trying to appease. It's not like their audience is like, no, we don't want this anymore. But I bring this up just to tie into a real story because I would imagine a mom wanted to do this to her kids. And this kind of gets us into a story that's very Step Brothers-esque, where there was an Italian mom who had to take her sons to court because they wouldn't help chip in on rent or paying for the house. And they had jobs, but they just decided we're just going to continue.
How old
basically,
are they?
They're 40.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she
This
finally,
is 40.
Yeah. She got
Meet Step Brothers.
the Italian court to take action, and they've managed to kick her out of, or for her to kick them out of the house. The sons were 40 and 42. She described them as parasites that were squatting in her home. The mom's 75, but it got to this point to where
wow.
I've
You're
never heard.
You're not taking care of your 75-year-old mother?
It's just it's rough that you get to that point, but I do wonder. We always loved the Will Ferrell and the John C. Reilly comedy, and so
Yes.
I'm thinking, what was that like for these guys? That they're obviously just terrible, but I'm just thinking like one of them's going around. It's like I like fresh fruit and chocolate chips in my pancakes. Make sure to write that down so you don't forget.
There's no Catalina wine mixer in this family.
No Catalina wine mixer. I wonder if they had bunk beds so they could do many activities in the room once they freed up all that space. There are people that Step Brothers, by the way, comedy classic.
Yes.
Terrific. Never cancel Step Brothers like they did Simpsons. Don't self-cancel any of that. There are people that I have encountered that sort of have this mentality of, I didn't ask to be born, so it's your job to take care of me. I'm serious. And I know people that they're that way about their parents. Like, you need to help me out here. I didn't have a say in the matter. I'm here now on earth. I don't want to do this life. I don't want to work. I don't want to have this. So you're going to have to provide for me forever. It's a weird mentality, but there are people that are just built like that.
Let me put you in a situation where you have a say. Peace out.
I think we should form a prison for those people.
Well, to make matters
if
worse,
your parents have to kick you out of the house to that extent, you should be taken by the state into a facility. And then that's where some taxpayer money could go.
The court did rule in favor of the mom, but now the sons have filed a lawsuit, and they're arguing that it's still. I'm trying to think. I had it pulled up.
They're basically Michigan. Is that what you're saying?
Is this Connor Stallions?
Yeah, they're just.
We'll have an injunction by noon today.
They're just countersuing, basically saying that the parents are obligated, pretty much under the same response you went forward with, Chad. Not putting it out in those blatant terms of I didn't want to be born into this, so you're having to help me out. But I mean, there's
I didn't
one
want to
thing
evict you, but you're forcing me to.
If the mom was dating an older man, did they ever yell to take their liver-spotted hands off their beautiful mother, the way Will Ferrell did in that movie?
Chad, what do you think that basement looks like there?
I think less about what it looks like and think more about what it smells like.
Yeah,
and it's not good.
Gives me
a
worse visual.
I guess with Italy, though, I think I remember reading about it. It's a lot more common for generations of family to live with one another. That's
no, multi-generational stuff.
Yeah.
But
very
my guess
common
is the 40-year-old
in the Latin American
dude,
community in Italy also.
The 40-year-old dude takes care of his 75-year-old mother, though.
Yes.
Typically.
Yeah. It's not the other way around.
It's like Stu from King of Queens. It's like his mom lives with him, but he pays the rent.
Well, and in Italy, if your parents want you out of the house, you leave too. You don't stay and then eventually sue them.
Join us tomorrow. Is Michigan about to sue the Big Ten? We'll hopefully have some details tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern.